You're listening to The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, Forces That Bring Riches to You by Catherine Ponder. Copyright BN Publishing. Online at bnpublishing.com. The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity. Introduction. There's gold dust in the air for you. This book is the result of several recent recessions and many years of lean living. Nobody likes recessions, and nobody likes lean living, and indeed nobody should like them. For 15 years, I tried to find such a book as this one. During those years of searching the bookshelves, I found that there are many books which give various ideas, but in none of them did I find a set of compact, simple laws for assuring success. I began searching for a book such as this after having been widowed and left with a small son to rear and educate. Since I had no training for work and no means of income, I would have given anything to have known then about the power of prosperous thinking. For a while, I experienced depression, ill health, loneliness, financial lack, and a sense of complete failure. It seemed that the whole world was against me, and that everything I did went wrong. But with my son to provide for, I could not settle for failure. I had to succeed for his sake as well as for my own. Finally, when I was at my lowest ebb emotionally, physically, and financially, I learned about the power of thought as an instrument for success or failure. I came to realize that the right use of my mind could become the key to healthy, happy, prosperous, successful living. As soon as I grasped this wonderful success secret, the tide began to change. The birth of prosperous thinking. You've heard much in recent years about positive thinking. Out of the recessions and lean years, another term has been born, prosperous thinking. The word prosper means to flourish, succeed, thrive, to experience favorable results. You are prosperous to the degree that you are experiencing peace, health, and plenty in your world. While prosperous thinking means many things to people, basically it gives you the power to make your dreams come true. Whether those dreams are concerned with better health, increased financial success, a happier personal life, more education and travel, or a deeper spiritual life. This book plainly shows how prosperous thinking has helped people in every walk of life to experience these results. Furthermore, it shows how prosperous thinking can do these things for you, too. As you read this book, chapter by chapter, you will automatically begin to develop the power of prosperous thinking. And almost as easily, you will begin to reap a harvest of prosperous results. The salesman with the golden touch. Years ago, a salesman used the power of prosperous thinking, although he may not have consciously been aware of it. When people asked him, "How's business?" he always gave this standard answer: "Business is wonderful because there's gold dust in the air." For him, it seemed to certainly be so. Every contact became a sale. After a while, whenever his name was mentioned, people always said, yes, everything he touches turns to gold. The laws of prosperity. During my first year in the ministry, one of the most severe business recessions since World War II hit this country. Members of my congregation began asking for lectures on ways to survive this difficult period. It was then that these dynamic laws of prosperity began to take form, and with breathtaking rapidity, these ideas worked for all types of people. How the laws have worked for others. For instance, within a week after the first lecture, 2 secretaries had received increases in pay, one with a promotion and new title. A stockbroker soon reported that he had more business than he had dared hope for, although most of his fellow workers were comparatively idle. One client, whom he had not seen for several years, appeared and handed him a check to invest for $200,000. A month after beginning to deliberately invoke prosperous thinking, his income was 4 times its usual amount. A lawyer who had several industrial clients then on strike or out of work reported that the recession was suddenly over for him. His income zoomed upward into the $2,000 a month bracket, which at the time seemed a great increase, though later, after he established a definite pattern of prosperous thinking, it seemed only normal. A steel manufacturer's agent, whose business was affected by the recession, reported that he unexpectedly received an order amounting to $4,500, which he had not solicited. One woman was a sales lady in a department store which employed more than 100 people. All of her fellow workers had been thinking and talking hard times. At the end of the month, after this woman began to deliberately think prosperously, She was the only one in the store who received a commission check for having oversold her quota for the month. The other employees had to create hard times and had gotten such results for themselves. The owner of an electrical business had an outstanding account of $750 owing his company. As he began to think of those owing him as prosperous, the account was quietly paid. A jeweler had an indebtedness owing him which he tried every means he knew to collect, including the use of unkind letters, all to no avail. When he, too, decided to think in prosperous terms about himself and the one owing him, to his amazement the creditor quickly paid up. One family that desired freedom from indebtedness suddenly inherited a nice sum of money. A government employee received a raise in pay that had been pending in Congress for several years. A telephone company employee also received a general raise that had been promised months earlier. A construction engineer received a new assignment to a $15.5 million construction job after having served on $1.5 million construction job. One couple even received an all-expense trip abroad. These are but a few examples of the power of prosperous thinking. Prosperity brings new look and new health. But more than financial returns appeared. As I weekly lectured on prosperous thinking, I began to realize that the people in attendance were beginning to blossom forth with a new look, a look of inner peace, poise, happiness, security, and stability not previously apparent. The failure look of depression and discouragement was replaced with a look of success, self-confidence, and inner happiness. The look of defeat was replaced with a look of dominion, authority, victory. It was wonderful to behold. New mental and physical health appeared for a number of people, too. One businessman had been told most of his life that he had a serious heart condition that would have to be pampered constantly. As he began to apply the power of prosperous thinking in every phase of his world, he relaxed more and more in mind and body. Tension, both conscious and unconscious, gradually eased. After a time, his doctor stated that his earlier heart trouble had vanished. Now, several years later, he remains healthier and happier than ever before. Several people with nervous conditions found new health, serenity, and peace of mind. A housewife in this group had for years visited a series of doctors who could find nothing organically wrong with her. As she began deliberately to practice prosperous thinking, she began to think more lovingly of others, including her husband. Her new attitude of appreciation gave him a feeling of approval he had not had from his wife in many a year. This, in turn, added to his self-confidence and was reflected as new success in his work. His new job success brought a happiness and satisfaction to their marriage that had long been missing. This woman's health improved so much that she soon appeared years younger, and her aches and pains faded as happiness came into the various departments of her life. Your whole outlook changes. A lonely, unhappy businesswoman who had often threatened suicide became so intensely interested in the laws of prosperity that she found interests outside herself. This led to a happier, more balanced life. The suicide talk stopped. A housewife and also a businessman whose secret drinking had become serious problems found new hope in their practice of prosperous thinking. They began to realize that their drinking problems could be overcome. As they gained this victorious expectation, they were able to begin resolving and dissolving inner hostilities and conflicts. Their drinking gradually diminished. Several marriages were saved after one or another of the marriage partners began to invoke these laws of prosperity. One person's divorced partner returned, and they were remarried. Several lonely, unmarried people were happily married, one after having been widowed for 20 years. A businessman who had always detested his work found, as he began using these ideas, that he got a whole new perspective on his job, and in due time he no longer disliked it. The salesman was right. That salesman was right. There is gold dust in the air. For you, for me, for everyone. The economists know this because they declare that we have now entered one of the richest eras the world has ever known, which they are describing as the golden 60s. The scientists know that there is gold dust in the air because they declare this universe to be composed of nothing but radiant substance or ether, to which man has unlimited access. Psychologists and metaphysicians know about the gold dust. They declare that man forms his world from the rich, unlimited substance within him and around him through his thoughts, emotions, words, and actions. And so let us proceed in confidence, knowing that there is gold dust in the air and that there is gold dust everywhere. As you begin reading this book, no matter what the conditions of your life may now be, do so in this attitude of mind. There is gold dust in the air for me. Through definite, deliberate, prosperous thinking, I now begin assimilating that gold dust, and even now I am beginning to experience gold dust results. Now proceed quickly to the following pages, where you will learn the exciting gold dust secrets of countless others. Catherine Ponder. The Shocking Truth About Prosperity, Chapter 1. The shocking truth about prosperity is that it is shockingly right instead of shockingly wrong for you to be prosperous. Russell H. Conwell emphasized this in his famous Acres of Diamonds lectures. I say you ought to be rich. You have no right to be poor. To live and not be rich is a misfortune, and it is doubly a misfortune because you could have been rich just as well as being poor. We ought to get rich, if we can, by honorable methods, and these are the only methods that sweep us quickly toward the goal of riches. Please note that the word rich means having an abundance of good or living a fuller, more satisfying life. Indeed, you are prosperous to the degree that you are experiencing peace, health, happiness, and plenty in your world. There are honorable methods that can carry you quickly towards that goal. It is easier to accomplish than you may now think. That, too, is the shocking truth about prosperity. Several decades ago, a businessman predicted that the religious leaders of the future would be forced to give more attention to helping their followers solve their economic and personal problems of the present, and that they would be less concerned with the dead past or unborn future. I agree with that businessman, and I wish to help you do just that. Solve your economic and personal problems of the present. As you do, your dead past and your unborn future will surely be taken care of. You should desire prosperity. Perhaps one of the greatest shocks I ever received was the one that became apparent when I began lecturing on prosperity. I soon realized that many of the people attending the lectures were still trying to resolve that old conflict of whether they should desire to be prosperous. Of course, they wanted prosperity, every normal person does, but they appeared to secretly wonder whether they should seek it or not, especially from a spiritual standpoint. Most of the business people attending the lecture seemed to feel guilty about wanting to be prosperous, though of course they were working hard every day in their jobs to do so. The question obviously was still in their minds, whether poverty was a spiritual virtue or a common vice. That conflict in their thinking was setting up a conflicting result in their affairs, which neutralized their efforts to succeed, no matter how hard they were working. Soon it became apparent that it would take the expression of some bold, even shocking ideas on the subject to blast out the limited beliefs that had bound these people to mediocre living for years. Realizing this, I spent several lecture periods explaining how God, man, and prosperity were all divinely related. After the initial shock of these ideas had passed, these fine people were greatly relieved and very happy that, at last, they no longer had to feel guilty about wanting to be prosperous. It was then that they began to experience the previously described results in rapid time. Since that time, in my lecturing around the country, in private counseling and correspondence on the subject with countless people, in radio, television, and newspaper interviews, I find that the same idea still persists. Perfectly wonderful people seem quite confused whether prosperity should be considered a spiritual blessing, but how relieved they are when shown that it definitely is. Poverty is a sin. And so again I say, it is shockingly right instead of shockingly wrong for you to be prosperous. Obviously, you cannot be very happy if you are poor, and you need not be poor. It is a sin. Poverty is a form of hell caused by man's blindness to God's unlimited good for him. Poverty is a dirty, uncomfortable, degrading experience. Poverty is actually a form of disease, and in its acute phases, it seems to be a form of insanity. Poverty fills prisons with thieves and murderers. It drives men and women to drink, prostitution, dope addiction, suicide. It drives potentially fine, talented, intelligent children to delinquency and crime. It makes people do things they otherwise would never dream of doing. Communism, one of the most dread movements in the world today, often gets a stronghold as a direct result of poverty. The governments which have become communist-dominated usually have done so for financial reasons, believing it is a way to financial security. The sinful results of poverty know no bounds. That is one of the reasons why, as a minister, I have felt so strongly led to do whatever I can to help people learn how to eradicate the sin of poverty from their lives. A doctor I know has said that he would have few patients if it were not for financial problems, which cause them worry, strain, and tension, all of which lead to ill health. He states that our mental hospitals are filled with people who have found that financial strain over a long period impaired their minds and bodies to the point of incapacity. It has even been estimated that 9/10 of mankind's ills are caused by the strain, misery, and unhappiness of poverty. Let us be done with thinking of poverty as a virtue. It is a common vice. If you have been living in financial lack and limitation, you have literally been living in vice. That, too, is the shocking truth about prosperity. But you need not continue living in financial vice. There is a way out. Prosperity is your divine heritage. The Bible is filled with rich promises regarding your potential prosperity as a child of God. You should be prosperous, well supplied, and have an abundance of good, because it is your divine heritage. Your Creator wants you that way. That is the shockingly nice truth about prosperity. Besides, you can't be much good to yourself or to anyone else unless you are prosperous. The person who does not desire to be prosperous is abnormal, because without prosperity, you live abnormally. You cannot live fully on the physical plane without proper food, comfortable clothing, warm shelter, and without freedom from excessive toil. Rest and recreation are also needed for your physical life. You cannot live fully on the mental plane without satisfying creative mental activity. Without books and time to enjoy them, without time to enjoy music, art, and other cultural interests, without opportunity and money for travel and intellectual association with others of similar interests. To live fully on the spiritual plane of life, you need time for quiet contemplation, for meditation, prayer, spiritual study, attendance at churches, lectures, and satisfying association with others on the spiritual path. It is therefore of supreme importance that you be prosperous for your physical, mental, and spiritual welfare and development. Make no excuses for putting up with lack or accepting it as a permanent arrangement in your life. Do not go to the other extreme either and talk of wanting to be prosperous for the good you can do. That is secondary. You want to be prosperous mainly because it is right that you should be. Prosperity is your divine heritage as the child of a king, as a son of God. Success is divinely ordained. There is no reason for you to think of prosperity as something separate from your spiritual life or beyond the pale of religion. You do not have to try to live in two worlds where you run things for 6 days and then on the 7th give God a chance to show what he can do. Take God as a rich, loving, understanding Father into all your affairs each day of your week. Ask his divine instruction and guidance about all your affairs, financial and otherwise, and you will be pleasantly surprised how much better every phase of your life will become. An analyst recently declared to me that he had found the most common cause of failure in people is the conflicting idea about whether success is divinely ordained or divinely damned. For instance, he stated that many had assured him that failure was more spiritually approved than success, since riches are regarded as an object of worship or as a false god. This doctor further stated that he has spent many an hour explaining to people who are not succeeding that being success-minded is not serving a false god, and that they should stop using God as an excuse for their failures. When you realize that God wants you to be prosperous, and that God, as the creator of this rich universe, is indeed the source of your prosperity, then you are not worshiping riches. You are not making prosperity a false god. You are simply claiming your prosperous heritage from the source of all your blessings. The Lord pointed out the right spiritual attitude toward prosperity when he told Moses to remind the children of Israel, "But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that hath given thee power to get wealth." The word wealth means grand living, and that is what a prosperous thinker should be working toward and should be expecting as his spiritual right. Perhaps you are recalling at this point a statement I also heard as a child which confused me about prosperity being a spiritual blessing. People often said, "I am poor, but I'm a good Christian." Even though I come from a family that has produced several ministers, I always shuddered when I heard that statement. My immediate reaction was, why should Christians or any other group have to be poor? God isn't poor, and He is our loving Father. Then, too, that statement made it sound as if all the rich folks were bound for hell. Somehow I could not figure out why rich people had to go to hell just because they were prosperous. It seemed rather inconsistent to me. The Bible is a prosperity textbook. Upon entering the ministry, I decided to settle the issue with my own mind by studying the biblical view of prosperity versus poverty. It was a pleasant surprise to discover that the Bible is the greatest textbook on prosperity ever written. The Bible clearly shows that you have not been pleasing God by settling for lack and limitation in your life, any more that you have been pleasing yourself. The very first chapter describes the rich universe created for man. The last book of the Bible symbolically describes heaven in rich terms. Most of the great men of the Bible were either born prosperous, became prosperous, or had access to riches whenever the need arose. Among them were Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, David, Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Nehemiah, Elijah, and Elisha. Why poverty is not spiritual. You may wonder why there has been so much talk of sacrifice, persecution, and hard times as necessary phases of the spiritual way of life. History reveals that the inspired yet practical teachings of the Bible continued to be observed during the early centuries, but soon religion became more secularized, leading to variations and departures from the original teachings. Later, the feudal system during the Middle Ages assured wealth only for the privileged few. During this period, the teachings of poverty and penance was offered to the masses as the only way to salvation in order to keep people in poverty and to make lack and privation a supposed Christian virtue. Unsuspecting millions were led to believe that it was pious to be poor, a belief which was useful in forestalling revolution among the masses. Some of those old feudal ideas about poverty as a spiritual virtue have persisted until today, but they are false, man-made ideas and not God's rich truth for you and me. Thus, make no further excuses to yourself or others for wanting to be prosperous. It is a divine desire that should be given divine expression. You can boldly give thanks that prosperity is your divine heritage, and that the Father's desire for you is unlimited good, not merely the means of a meager existence. Right attitudes will pay your bills. Now, in order to help you establish the all-important prosperous attitude that God is the source of man's supply as the creator of this rich universe, and that God's will for you is therefore the wealth of the universe, I suggest that you paraphrase the words of the Lord to Moses. I will remember the Lord God, for He it is that giveth me power to experience wealth. Perhaps you are thinking, yes, but is this kind of thinking practical? Can such attitudes actually help put shoes on the baby, food on the table, and pay the rent? Yes, it can. Recently, I talked with a young woman who seemed to have everything against her. When stricken with paralysis, her drinking, gambling, non-working husband deserted her, leaving several children to support and educate. Though she had a roof over her head, it was mortgaged. Though her husband was required by court order to provide a small monthly allowance for support of the children, it was insufficient to meet their needs. However, each time that I visited this woman, who for many months was bedridden and more recently confined to a wheelchair, she always joyously reported new channels of supply which had opened to her. On one visit, she stated that she had been given enough canned food to last several months, that money had appeared as needed for clothes for her children from some relatives in a distant state, that her own medical expenses were being met by a friend who was overseas, that indeed every financial need was being met. Fresh paint had even arrived for the outside of the house, and a neighbor was busily repainting it. When I asked what her prosperity secret was and how she had been able to meet every bill on time while she was in a wheelchair with no ample or steady income, she said that one prayer had been her great source of strength and supply. Whenever a financial need was near, she would quietly meditate over and over upon this promise from the 46th Psalm. Be still and know that I am God. One day the mortgage payment was due on the house in the amount of $40. She had not a cent of the money, so she quietly began to think on these words. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God at work in this situation now. Around noon, she got a sense of peace about the situation and so completed her meditation period. About an hour later, as she was being served lunch by a relative, in walked a neighbor who placed some money in her hand. He said, "Our Sunday school class got to thinking about you, and there was some extra money in the treasury, and we decided we would like to share it with you." The amount he handed her was $40. This woman, recognizing God as the source of her supply, has proved that this source will never fail her, even under extreme conditions of ill health, marital disappointment, and financial uncertainty. Of course, her great desire is to become self-supporting and financially independent of gifts from relatives, neighbors, and friends. Surely she will realize this desire as she perseveres in prosperous thinking. She is now beginning to walk again for the first time in several years and will soon be able to work too. Meanwhile, she is proving that God's rich supply can come in several unforeseen ways to meet the needs of the moment, regardless of life's hard conditions. The psalmist was recognizing God as the source of his supply when he declared, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." It is a good prosperity prayer to declare often. A housewife needed $100 to cover 2 bills that were due by the end of the week. Early that week, whenever fear tried to creep in as to how she would pay those bills, she declared over and over, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." On Friday morning, the day the bills were due, a check arrived in the mail for $110. It was from a company her husband had worked for several years previously. They wrote a letter saying they had just found in her husband's account that this amount was still due him, and that they were enclosing it to clear his records with them. A businessman with a large family was getting toward the end of the month financially. He was paid once a month, and it was still a week until payday. The groceries were getting low. His wife reminded him of these facts on Friday before Saturday morning grocery shopping time. Together they agreed to look to God for their supply and to affirm guidance. They did so by constantly affirming, "Our sufficiency is of God." Saturday morning, the mail arrived for the check from the State Revenue Department enclosing an income tax refund in the amount of $60. This couple was expecting several $100s in federal income tax refund, but had forgotten about a possible state tax refund. The amount covered their needs nicely until payday. A saleswoman who had a lot of financial expense and whose sales had fallen off decided to look to God as the source of her supply by affirming over and over from the Lord's Prayer, "Give me this day my daily bread." It was like a landslide. Her sales picked up tremendously so that the commission checks started coming in again, plus her salary. Neighbors brought her prepared dishes of food as a token of their esteem for her. She was given several lovely items of new clothing by a friend. Some of her customers brought her gifts in appreciation for her loving service to them. A number of invitations into friends' homes for dinner were extended, which she enjoyed. Daily, her needs began to be supplied, as she had prayed they would be. Her daily bread appeared in many satisfying forms. How to stabilize your finances. Of course, the wonderful thing about recognizing God as the source of all riches and taking him into your financial affairs and into every department in your life is that the more you do, the more stabilized every phase of your life becomes. In due time, there are no stringent financial emergencies to be dramatically met with instant manna from heaven. Instead, things just get better and better financially, so that there is always substance on hand to meet your needs. The psalmist pointed out what happens when you consistently think of God as the source of your supply. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on this law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the streams of water, that bringeth forth its fruit in its season, whose leaf also doth not wither, and that whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. But it is good to know that until you develop a proper understanding to bring forth the substance of the universe in an abundant, unbroken stream of supply, the financial needs of the moment can be met by looking to the source of all riches, a rich heavenly Father, the link between thought and supply. Perhaps you are thinking, if my prosperity comes basically from God, if he is the source of my supply, then why all the talk about prosperous thinking? What does prosperous thinking have to do with my supply? God's rich supply is all around you universally, as well as innately within you, as talents and abilities and ideas longing for expression. But that rich supply and substance must be contacted and used. Your mind is your connecting link with it. Your attitudes, your mental concepts, beliefs, and outlook are your connecting link with God's rich substance and your access to it. God can only do for you what he can do through you by means of your thoughts and ideas, which lead to your reactions. Thus, prosperous thinking opens the way to prosperous results. Begin by making contact with the rich, universal substance around you and with the rich substance within you by declaring often, I stir up the gifts of God within me and around me, and I am blessed on every hand with happiness, success, and true achievement. Just by declaring this idea, you will begin stirring up the riches of the universe, attracting them to you and expressing them through you. Success adores the prosperous attitude. Another of the shocking truths about prosperity is that thoughts of your mind have made you what you are, and thoughts of your mind will make you whatever you become from this day forward. The more you realize this, the more you will come to know that people, places, conditions, and events cannot keep your God-given prosperity and success from you. Once you decide to deliberately employ prosperous thinking as your ally for success. Indeed, you will discover that the things, people, and events that have previously worked against you will either begin to work for you and with you, or they will fade out of your life, and new people and events will appear to help you succeed. That is the power of prosperous thinking. Some authorities believe that one prosperous thought is more powerful than 1,000 failure thoughts, and that 2 prosperous attitudes steadily held and expressed are more powerful than 10,000 failure attitudes. Success adores the prosperous attitude. Of that you can be sure. A loving father seems to adore the prosperous attitude too. Surely others adore it and are attracted to it and work for it. More about these things in the next chapter. Meanwhile, remind yourself often that God is the source of your supply, and then make spiritual contact with Him, His rich substance and rich ideas that await your appropriation. I am the rich child of a loving Father. I now accept and claim His rich good for me in every phase of my life. My own God-given success in the form of rich ideas and rich results now appears. Remind yourself often of these shocking truths about prosperity, that it is shockingly right instead of shockingly wrong to be prosperous, that God created a rich universe for you and wants you to enjoy it, that prosperity can come quickly through your deliberate use of prosperous thinking, which leads to the expression of rich ideas, rich actions, and rich results. Thus, dare to ask a friendly, interested, rich, loving Father for guidance often. And with Moses, remember the Lord God, for He it is that giveth thee power to get wealth. Now launch forth happily and expectantly into the dynamic laws of prosperity, the spiritual and mental laws which can and will transform your life. Solomon realized the need for exploring them when he explained, Poverty and shame shall be to him that refuseth instruction. You can, from this page forward, begin freeing yourself of limitation, lack, and failure. As you accept and use the simple but powerful ideas given in this chapter and in the pages to come, you will find yourself on the royal road to success. Furthermore, you will find it a pleasant experience that produces satisfying results. That is the power of prosperous thinking, and that is the shockingly nice truth about it. The Basic Law of Prosperity, Chapter 2. I learned the basic law of prosperity the hard way. I have been earning the right to tell you about it for a long time. 15 years ago, life looked hopeless for me. Widowed and with an infant son, I had no training for any type of work, and therefore no means of income. My family during that period was not able to offer much financial assistance. If you could have seen me then, you would have doubtlessly have said, prosperous thinking or no prosperous thinking, there goes a hopeless case. It was during this miserable period that I learned about the power of our thinking as an instrument for success or failure. It soon became plain to me that my previous failures were due largely to my previous failure thinking. But that same power of thought, when rightly directed, could be the key to healthy, happy, successful living. What a realization it was on the day I read the words of Solomon, "As a man thinketh within himself, so is he." And later the words of Job, "Thou shalt decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee, and light shall shine upon thy way." From the philosopher James Allen I learned, through his thoughts, man holds the key to every situation and contains within himself that transforming and regenerative agency by which he may make himself what he wills. Then I excitedly surmised that my potential wealth, health, and happiness were actually within me, waiting to be radiated outward into my world as healthy, wealthy, happy thoughts, feelings, expectations, and decrees, which in turn would attract like results into my life. As soon as I grasped this simple but all-powerful success secret and began applying it, the tide changed and my ships began to come in. The way soon opened for me to literally work my way through business school. I thereafter became secretary to Joe Talley, a young lawyer who became mayor of our town, a candidate for Congress, and who later expanded the Talley law firm to include several attorneys and secretaries who served a number of prosperous clients. More recently, Mr. Talley has served as president of Kiwanis International. At the height of my work with this attorney, I felt led to go into the ministry so that I might help others to realize and apply the spiritual and mental keys to healthy, happy, prosperous living that had meant so much to me. Upon thinking back, I now realize that consciously and unconsciously, I invoked the basic prosperity law of radiation and attraction every step of the way. Recently, on meeting old friends whom I had not seen for many years, they exclaimed in astonishment, "Catherine, what has happened to you? You seem so different from the very serious, unsure, unhappy person we once knew. You now seem so happy and radiant, even victorious. Tell us your secret. How did you get that way?" I then explained to them the basic law of life that is discussed in this chapter and throughout this book. It is because of my own personal use of this basic law that I feel so strongly about it and emphatically believe that it can work for you even in greater ways than it has for me. A number of people who have attended my prosperity lectures have used it with astounding success. The law of laws. Truly, the laws that govern prosperity are just as sure and work as the laws that govern mathematics, music, physics, and other sciences. The Bible describes that basic law of prosperity when it speaks of sowing and reaping, or giving and receiving. The scientists describe it as action and reaction. By some, it has been termed the law of supply and demand. Emerson described it as the law of compensation, whereby like attracts like. He declared that the law of compensation is the law of laws. You cannot get something for nothing. I agree with Emerson that it is time the law of compensation was emphasized as life's basic law. I like to think of this basic law of prosperity as radiation and attraction, that what you radiate outward in your thoughts, feelings, mental pictures, and words, you attract into your life and affairs. But you cannot get something for nothing. The reason why there is still poverty in this universe of lavish abundance is that many people still do not understand this basic law of life. They do not yet realize that they must radiate in order to attract, and that what they do radiate, they constantly attract. Most people today still have to learn that they cannot get something for nothing, but must give before receiving, or must sow before reaping. When they do not give or sow in terms of prosperity, they make no contact with God's lavish abundance, and so there is no channel formed through which the rich, unlimited substance of the universe can pour forth its riches to them. The truth of this was recently brought to my attention when I had contact with some people in a poverty-stricken area. I soon discovered that these people only wanted a handout. They were not interested in invoking the basic law of prosperity by giving or sowing first. Instead, they were trying to get something for nothing, which simply cannot be done. Thus, they continued to live in poverty. You can always give something. Perhaps you are thinking, what could such a person give when he seems so in lack? There is always something a person can give, either tangibly or intangibly, that will put him in touch with God's rich supply. A widow with a house full of children once telephoned a counselor. She had no money or food for her children. It was lunchtime and her children had not eaten since the day before. She was desperate. The counselor who took the call knew well what it was like to find oneself in such a predicament. She had learned that the power of prosperous thinking could literally supply manna from heaven at a financially desperate period in her own life. With great compassion, she explained the magic power of giving in some way, which would start the substance flowing back in appropriate form. Of course, when she explained that the widow must give in order to receive, the widow's first reaction was much the same that yours or mine might be the first time we were told we must give to receive. She lamented, "That's just it. I have nothing to give." To which the counselor gently replied, "My dear, of course you have something to give. We always have something to give. Indeed, we always have more to give than we at first realize. She then urged this frantic widow to look about her and to ask for divine guidance concerning what she should give. The widow was assured that this counselor would be praying with her in the faith that she would be divinely led as to how to give and how to receive thereafter. This counselor also told her that after starting the flow of substance by giving, she was then to get ready to receive by preparing her table for that meal she so wished for her children, and by preparing her grocery list with which to shop, in the assurance that the money would manifest very soon for those groceries. In faith, the widow sat down and prayerfully asked what she had that she could give. Suddenly she remembered flowers growing in her yard, which she happily cut and gave to a sick neighbor who seemed overjoyed to receive them. Next, she prepared her table with the best china, silver, and linens in the house. This caused pleasure and excitement among her children, who then expectantly awaited a good meal. Just as she was completing her grocery list, someone who had been owing her money for a long time dropped by and paid her $30 on their debt. $30 which she had long since given up ever getting back. If I could shout only one message to the whole world regarding life's secrets, it would be this: that you cannot get something for nothing, but that you can have the best of everything when you give full measure for the good wish to receive. Since I have been writing about prosperity, I have received a number of letters from people who do not yet understand this law and who are still trying to get something for nothing. One woman asked that $30,000 be sent to her immediately to pay off old debts. She didn't write once or twice, but 3 times before she was convinced she must use this basic law of prosperity and bring in her own supply. Radiate and you will attract. Emerson might have been describing this law of giving and receiving, or radiation and attraction, when he wrote, "Great hearts send forth steadily the secret forces that incessantly draw great events." And who are the great hearts? Those people who dare to think and radiate great thoughts and expectancies of success and prosperity instead of failure, trouble, and limitation. There's nothing great, unusual, or praiseworthy about failure, trouble, and limitation. Anyone can experience those things by following the line of least resistance and by entertaining the usual failure thoughts that one constantly hears every day. How often one hears the complaint, "Everything happens to me. I just can't win for losing. This is a tough world. The other fellow gets the breaks." This beginning usually leads into a conversation filled with unpleasant experiences of the day, criticism of jobs, co-workers, families, the governments, world leaders, war, crime, disease, and hard times, hard times, hard times. Each of us constantly use the law of radiation and attraction, whether we are aware of it or not. But if you wish to enjoy more prosperity and success in life, you have to consciously, boldly, and deliberately take hold of your thoughts and feelings and redirect them towards prosperity and success. It is up to you to dare to choose and radiate outward through your thinking what you really wish to experience in life, rather than to get bogged down in unpleasant or failure experiences of the moment. These conditions can change as quickly as you change your thinking about them. A friend in the public relations business recently used the law of radiation and attraction with successful results. For some time, he had desired a certain out-of-state account and had made every reasonable effort to obtain it. Finally, he decided that he would definitely entertain and mentally radiate the desire for that account strongly, deliberately, and boldly, feeling that surely, in due time, he would receive that account or a bigger one. He quietly sat down and thought about that account as though he were already handling it. He went over that account in his mind and thought of all the ways he would attempt to serve that client's best interest if he were handling their public relations. He thought about the account and the people involved for a long time and in great detail. He also declared over and over for a time, "I am not discouraged. I am persistent. I go forward. I am determined to achieve success in God's own wonderful way for me." When a sense of peace came over him, he dismissed the matter from his mind. A few weeks later, he attended a convention in which a number of his clients were involved. While swimming with several of them in a motel pool, he casually met the man whom he had been trying for months to meet and who had charge of that out-of-state account. Right there in the pool, they negotiated. When he joyously related his experience to me, he declared it was doubtless that prosperity law of radiation and attraction that brought the happy results. I have observed in talking with hundreds of people who have gone from failure to success that it is what we really think deep within ourselves most of the time, rather than the big front we may put up to others, that unconsciously attracts like results to us. There is an age-old maxim that says, "We are where we are because we are what we are, and we are what we are because of our habitual thinking." Many people work hard to attract greater good in superficial ways without first habitually radiating its mental equivalent, and that they are sorely disappointed when their great efforts result in failure and disappointment. Once when I was talking with a lady who felt she would like to be married, I suggest that she invoke the law of radiation and attraction. After explaining that she must radiate before she could attract, I suggested that she prayerfully radiate these ideas over and over. Divine love expressing through me now draws to me all that is needed to make me happy and my life complete. A little later, I began receiving reports from mutual friends that she was working hard on the attracting angle, but was radiating nothing more than telephone calls and obvious invitations to all the men of her acquaintance. Later, she returned and reported that the suggested prayer method had not worked. Gently, I reminded her that she had not radiated the prayer method suggested, but had radiated the scare method, which had not been suggested. The method had worked in reverse because she had reversed the process. A middle-aged widow more recently dared to try the radiation and attraction method for the same purpose. While floating in a swimming pool, she silently affirmed over and over, "Divine love expressing through me now draws to me all that is needed to make me happy and my life complete." Presently, she heard a man's voice calling to her from the side of the pool, inquiring about the water, which she assured him was wonderful. Soon he was in the water, and a little later he was in her life as her husband. Mental preparation comes first. What a thrill it is to realize that all things can be accomplished within the mind first, that your mind is your divine power for good. The reason all things can be accomplished mentally first is that the mind is the connecting link between the formed and unformed world. It's up to you in this wonderful age to claim your spiritual dominion of great good over everything, and to dare to subdue, change, or reform your world as you wish. Of course, you have been given all of this power to produce good and only good. Man's difficulties come when he uses his power in reverse. But what a sense of freedom it gives you to realize that whatever you center your attention upon steadily, constantly, and deliberately in your thoughts, feelings, and expectancies forms the expectancies of your life. When you realize this, life becomes easier, simpler, and more richly satisfying. You then no longer feel that you have to argue, beg, reason, plead, or appeal to anyone for your desired good. Instead, you quietly go to work in your thinking to mentally choose, mentally accept, and mentally radiate what you wish to experience in life. It gives you a victorious feeling even before the rich results begin to pour in. Be deliberate about wealth. You've got to radiate deliberately in order to attract the good you desire. Otherwise, you get into a limited trend of thought and produce limited results. What you do radiate or deliberately entertain mentally, you constantly attract. It may not appear that this law works in this exact way when you look at people who seem to be succeeding who apparently do not deserve it. But in due season, their health, wealth, and happiness crumble if it is not supported by a firm foundation of right thought and feeling. It is just a matter of the mills of the gods grinding slowly. Instead of fretting about whether the law of radiation and attraction is working rightly in the lives of others, proceed quietly to prove the laws of prosperous thinking for yourself. A stockbroker whose business associates were watching the market reports and declaring how slow things were, slipped into a private office and quietly relaxed. As he did so, he began to radiate this thought: everything and everybody prospers me now. Suddenly, the telephone began to ring and ring. Within a short time, he had received more business by telephone than he had received through any channel in several days. A watch repairman's business was slow. As he boarded an early morning bus, he, too, remembered the prosperity law of radiation and attraction and began to silently declare, "Everything and everybody prospers me now." For the next few days, he had many new customers come into his store to have watches and jewelry repaired. Soon he had received enough repair work to keep him busy for many weeks. You are magnetic. Each of us is a magnet, and as a magnet, you do not have to force success and prosperity to yourself. Instead, you can develop that exalted, expectant, prosperous state of mind that is a magnet for all good things of the universe to hasten to you, rather than entertaining the tense, critical, anxious, depressed, unforgiving, possessive state of mind that is a magnet for all kinds of trouble and failure. Since you have the tangible and intangible equivalent of whatever you dare to choose, mentally entertain and radiate, stop thinking of things as apart from or outside yourself. Stop thinking that people, things, circumstances, and conditions have power to hurt or harm you. Start realizing that nothing can stand between you and that good that you dare to choose mentally and radiate outward through your thoughts, feelings, words, and expectancies. Choose and radiate mentally. Choose and radiate emotionally. Choose and radiate constantly and persistently. A woman recently told me that since she had been invoking the power of prosperous thinking deliberately, everyone in her family had received wonderful blessings. Her husband had received several raises in pay. Her brother has become president of his company. 2 sisters have retired with handsome incomes. Another sister has become the first woman ever to hold a certain type of executive position for her company. Another brother had received a managerial position. A little leaven has leavened the whole loaf in that family. Outer steps will come easily. Of course, I do not mean to imply through all these people's experiences that you simply entertain and radiate the mental equivalent of the good desired and then do nothing more. Often you have to take definite external steps as well. But you will discover that by working out the mental concept of the desired good first, the outer steps will then unfold easily, almost automatically at times, without strained effort on your part. The more you turn your mind in rich directions, the less you seem to have to exert undue human effort to produce results. Work you will, but it will be work as satisfying self-expression rather than work just to survive. Your rich mind power and radiations seem to have a way of going forth and producing right opportunities, events, and circumstances for prosperity and success, so that you almost unconsciously walk into them. Release your pent-up substance. We are all filled with pent-up substance, energy, and divine ability, which wishes to work for us, through us, and around about us. Psychologists declare that the average person uses only about 10% of his mind power. Medical authorities claim that the average person only uses about 25% of his physical power. Psychologists further state that man can release more result-getting power in 1 hour of concentrated use of his mind than in 24 hours of physical work. Some psychologists even believe that man can release more result-getting power through 1 hour of concentrated thought than through a month of physical work. Surely there is great power within and around each of us for our use. You can release this pent-up substance, energy, and power within you for prosperous living through releasing deliberate thoughts, feelings, and mental pictures of success, prosperity, and riches. As you do so, your rich thoughts, feelings, and mental pictures are radiated outward into the rich, powerful ethers of this universe, where they make contact with the rich, universal substance. This rich, universal substance is filled with divine intelligence and power that then moves among and works through people, conditions, and opportunities to attract that which corresponds with the rich radiations that you have sent forth, and the prosperous results then appear. Indeed, this wonderful universe is rich and friendly to everyone. It wishes all mankind to be prosperous, well, and happy, and for the affairs of man and the world to be in divine order. At this point, however, don't be too concerned about the theory of radiation and attraction. Just begin accepting it and using it as a prosperity secret. All of the prosperity laws stated throughout this book are but various ways of invoking the basic law of radiation and attraction. You will find your use of them a delightful, exciting, fascinating, and richly rewarding process. I now invite you to begin soaring through the pages of this book, reminding yourself these truths. I am an irresistible magnet with the power to attract unto myself everything that I divinely desire, according to the thoughts, feelings, and mental pictures I constantly entertain and radiate. I am the center of my universe. I have the power to create whatever I wish. I attract whatever I radiate. I attract whatever I mentally choose and accept. I begin choosing and mentally accepting the highest and best in life. I now choose and accept health, success, and happiness. I now choose lavish abundance for myself and for all mankind. This is a rich, friendly universe, and I dare to accept its riches, its hospitality, and to enjoy them now. The Vacuum Law of Prosperity, Chapter 3. You have heard it said that nature abhors a vacuum. It is particularly true in the realm of prosperity. The vacuum law of prosperity is one of the most powerful, though it takes bold, daring faith to set it into operation, as well as a sense of adventure and expectation to reap its full benefits. When a person is honestly trying to be prosperous, is thinking along prosperous lines, and still fails, it is usually because he needs to invoke the vacuum law of prosperity. Basically, the vacuum law of prosperity is this. If you want great good, greater prosperity in your life, start forming a vacuum to receive it. In other words, get rid of what you don't want to make room for what you do want. If there are clothes in the closet or furniture in your home or office that no longer seem right for you, if there are people among your acquaintances and friends that no longer seem congenial, begin moving the tangible and intangibles out of your life in the faith that you can have what you really want and desire. Often it is difficult to know what you do want until you get rid of what you do not want. Let go of the lesser. Inevitably, in your life experiences, you will find that when the good you wish has not appeared, it is usually because you need to release and let go of something to make room for it. New substances do not flow easily into a cluttered situation. If you want greater good in your life, what are you letting go of or getting rid of to make room for it? Nature does abhor a vacuum, and when you begin moving out of your life what you do not want, you automatically are making way for what you do want. By letting go of the lesser, you automatically make room for your greater good to come in. Recently, a couple used this vacuum law of prosperity in furnishing their new home. From their former home, they brought only the furniture they really liked and felt appropriate for the new atmosphere. They fearlessly gave away a great deal of their old furniture and simply left bare spaces in their new home. Visualizing those spaces filled with the kind of furniture they definitely wanted. For a while, nothing seemed to happen, but they remained steadfast to their vision of beautiful, appropriate new furniture. Then one day, the husband, who worked for a large company, was placed on a merit point system. As he produced certain prosperous results for his company, his points of merit increased. These points could be applied toward a number of tangible rewards, one of which was furniture. A businessman had been trying for a number of months to sell his home because he was being transferred to another state. He heard about the vacuum law of prosperity and realized that though he had earnestly desired to sell his home for a number of months, he had done nothing to form a vacuum of any kind through which his desired good could begin manifesting. And so he sat down quietly in his study one day and mentally pictured each room of the house as empty, just as it would look after the house had been sold and he had moved out. He visualized a vacuum of emptiness everywhere. He then made notes concerning the furniture mover he desired to handle the moving and mentally worked out all the detailed plans of the move, just as though the house was already sold. Within a few days, a buyer appeared who liked everything about the house and gave him a check for the thousands of dollars equity, as well as for the down payment involved. Form a vacuum for health. Whenever you dare to form a vacuum, the substance of the universe then rushes in to fill that empty space. This applies on the spiritual, mental, and physical planes of life. A businessman got very sick for weeks and was under his physician's care. Every possible thing was done for him medically by his doctor, a very fine physician. But it all seemed to no avail. This man just got weaker and weaker. It seemed that his body was filled with poison, and nothing seemed to dissolve it. Finally, one night, perspiring from a high fever and deep cough, this man finally remembered the vacuum law and realized that there must be something he needed to release. Since he knew that the mind and emotions have such a powerful effect on the body, perhaps there was some mental attitude or emotional feeling that had to go to help eradicate his pain, fever, and weakness. He became very quiet and silently asked divine intelligence to reveal to him what he needed to release. Suddenly, he began to think of a person against whom he had been holding a strong grudge. He had said a number of unkind things about this person and had gone to great lengths to hurt him. He then mentally reviewed the events between them that had caused the grudge and his later desire to hurt that person. As he honestly thought about it, he realized that the other person may not have known that his feelings had been hurt from the events that took place, and perhaps there was no reason for him to hold a grudge at all. There never is. As he lay in bed with a high fever, he began to declare over and over, "I fully and freely forgive you. I lose you and let you go. So far as I am concerned, that incident between us is finished forever. I do not wish to hurt you. I wish you no harm. I am free and you are free, and all is again well between us." In a little while, a feeling of peace, quietness, and release came over him. For the first time in many nights, he slept peacefully. The next morning, his fever was gone, and his physician declared that the poison miraculously left his system overnight. At long last, he was on the road to recovery. Through forgiveness, this man had formed the vacuum needed so that new life could restore his body to health and his mind to peace. Forgiveness is the answer. Most folks are afraid of the word forgive, thinking that it means they must do something unpleasant and dramatic. But the word simply means to give for, to let go of old ideas, feelings, or conditions, and to give something better in their place. The giving for process forms a vacuum and makes way for new good to rush in. I have discovered from talking with hundreds of people about their problems and from corresponding with hundreds more that inevitably, when a stubborn person does not yield, it is because there is a need for forgiveness. I have further discovered that if only one person connected with the problem will start the action of forgiveness, all concerned will respond. Be blessed and the solution will come. For instance, a very wealthy woman became involved in a legal tangle over some of her deceased husband's business property. It was all very embarrassing to her because the defendant in the court case whom she was suing was a former family friend. In great distress, she attended a prayer group one night and poured out her plight to those present. To her dismay, however, the prayer group members did not become upset about her problem at all, nor did anyone seem particularly sympathetic. In fact, they completely surprised her by saying that her problem would be solved if she would forgive the man who she was suing. Aghast, she replied, "Forgive him? I only wanted you to pray that I would win against him in this court case. He has done such terrible things." But the prayer group stood firm. She left in disgust, but returned the next week and was again assured that forgiveness could solve everything. For many days after that, she began to consider seriously the power of forgiveness. One day, as she was driving along in her car, thinking of this former family friend with whom she was now at law, she cried out, "Lord, I humanly cannot forgive that man, but if you can, please forgive him through me." Suddenly, a feeling of great peace came, and she then gave thanks for it and dismissed the matter from her mind. A few days later, this man came into town and went to see her lawyer. He asked her lawyer if he might pay her a personal visit. Hesitantly, the lawyer replied, "I suppose so, but it would do you no good. If you want to settle this case, you will have to deal with me as her attorney." The defendant replied, "Oh, I do not wish to visit this lady to talk about the court case. I wish to visit her simply because we were once friends, and I always greatly admired her husband. I would just like to see her as in former times and talk of old times." And so in a friendly way he paid his call, during the course of which the subject of the court case finally arose. They amicably agreed to settle the matter quietly out of court, to the mutual satisfaction of all concerned. Thus, the power of letting go of fixed ideas, attitudes, and opinions which make way for more pleasant experiences. A forgiveness technique. Here is a forgiveness technique that can form a vacuum for whatever good your life seems to need now. Sit for half an hour every day and mentally forgive everyone that you are out of harmony with, feel badly toward, or are concerned about. If you have accused anyone of injustice, if you have discussed anyone unkindly, if you have criticized or gossiped about anyone, if you are legally involved with anyone, mentally ask their forgiveness. Subconsciously, they will respond. In like manner, if you have accused yourself of failure or mistakes, forgive yourself. Forgiveness can form the vacuum that will undam your prosperity and success. Mentally declare to others, God's forgiving love has set us free. Divine love now produces perfect results, and all is again well between us. I behold you with the eyes of love, and glory in your success, prosperity, and complete good. It is good to declare for yourself, I am forgiven and governed by God's love alone, and all is well. I once talked with a lady who was having a great difficulty in her marriage. Her husband was on the brink of losing a very fine job because of his drinking and instability. When I suggested that she let go those ideas about her husband and form a vacuum for greater good to come to them by forgiveness, she self-righteously declared, there is no reason for me to try forgiveness. There is nothing to forgive. I love my husband. But I suggested that some kind of vacuum obviously needed to be formed, that there was much about their situation that she would like to be free of, and that perhaps it was not her husband she needed to forgive, but that all of us need to practice forgiveness every day because of many negative subconscious attitudes stored in our emotions of which we are not even consciously aware. Rather reluctantly, she finally agreed to sit for half an hour every day and practice forgiveness. Later, she declared in amazement that the names of people she had long forgotten came to her during those times, and that unpleasant or unhappy experiences of the past floated up in her memory. To all of these, she declared words and thoughts of freedom, release, and forgiveness, as well as for and concerning her husband's recent behavior. As she began to feel relieved and freed of a lot of old, half-buried, hostile emotions and attitudes, her husband's drinking ceased. He began to work very hard in his job again, and success came in such a big way that she was even able to stop working and provide a beautiful home for her husband, which had long been their desire. Thus, the power of forgiveness. Releasing is magnetic. Are you clinging to the thought of how some troublesome situation in your life can be made right? What shape and form the solution should take? Then release, lose, let go. Declare to the situation or personalities involved, I release, lose, let go, and let God. Do not be fearful of letting go. Nothing can ever be lost through spiritual release. Instead, your own good and the good of all concerned is much freer to move into your life. Through release, your power of attracting good is greatly increased. One word of caution here about attitudes towards the tangible things you release. I once felt led to go through my closet and give away most of the clothes therein to my sister. These clothes were perfectly good, but I had tired of them, and no new clothes had recently appeared. So I felt by passing them on, I was making way for the new clothes. After mailing these clothes to her, I felt happy and expectant about the new clothes I was so sure would manifest. But for a number of weeks, nothing happened. Finally, I realized that I was still mentally hanging on to the clothes I had sent her, thinking, if I had that dress or suit I sent Sis, I would wear it today. It was then necessary for me to re-release what I thought I had already released. In my mind, I went over every item I had sent her, and declared to each individual piece of clothing mentally, I fully and freely release you. I completely lose you and let you go. So far as I'm concerned, you have served your purpose in my wardrobe, and I no longer need you. You are now in your perfect place. Therefore, new and more beautiful clothes appeared very fast in my closet. It was as though a magnetic influence had gone to work for me. A friend who knew nothing of my empty closet quietly came to me and said, I have some money I wish to share with you. When I prayed about what to do with this particular amount, the only thought that kept coming to me was that I should give it to you, perhaps for some clothes. You appear well supplied with clothes, but the thought persisted, and so here it is with my blessing. That started the flow of substance, which then came to me from here, there, and everywhere. Some articles I had written had not been accepted, and so in a doubtful but hopeful mind I had revised them, weeks earlier and resubmitted them. Now they were accepted and I was paid. Several people saw items while shopping and thought, "That looks like Catherine." They purchased them for me as gifts. In each instance, it was items of clothing I had been mentally imaging as hanging in that closet. One friend back home went on a shopping trip there. We had not corresponded in some time, so she had no conscious way of knowing about the empty closet. Nevertheless, packages arrived with gifts of clothing for me resulting from her shopping trip. She wrote later, "I just kept getting the feeling you could use those various items, and somehow I could not resist getting them for you. I shall be very happy if you can use them." I learned quite a lesson from this experience. None of this happened until I freely released the clothes I had sent my sister. A gift that is not freely released after being given is not a gift at all. If you cannot give freely, don't bother. But if you do give, be sure you graciously released what you have given. Otherwise, no good has been done. No vacuum has been formed. Use the substance at hand. Another way of invoking the vacuum law of prosperity is by using your present visible substance without withholding it, thereby making way for new prosperity to flow to you. However, you have to do this in a certain attitude of mind in order to produce rich results. When there does not seem enough prosperity on hand to meet present needs, or when you seem blocked in attaining greater prosperity, take control of the situation, take control in your thoughts and feelings. Rather than feeling helpless, defenseless, or sorry for yourself, declare to those financial appearances, "Peace, be still." Take your wallet, checkbook, or other tangible evidences of financial supply in your hands and declare concerning them, "You are even now filled with the rich bounty of God who supplies my every need now." Then is the time to fearlessly and boldly use the substance they contain as far as it will go in the present situation. If there are bills to be paid, do not wait until enough money comes in to pay all of them, but go right ahead in faith and pay those you can. That is breaking the substance on hand and sending it forth so that it can multiply. Look up towards prosperity. Establishing and maintaining a prosperous attitude, just as though your bounty were already completely visible, is important at this point. This is not the time to talk lack, to withhold, or to practice stringent economy. Instead, this is the time to use up to the last of your financial assets to the last penny, if necessary. If you withhold, talk about financial lack at this point, it will cost you double. Instead, look up mentally and give thanks for the substance you already have to send out. Then boldly send it forth with a rich flourish and a rich blessing. Joyously declare, "This is the bounty of God, and I send it forth with wisdom and joy." When you look up, regardless of appearances to the contrary, you are always provided for. Perhaps the person who taught me the most about this phase of the vacuum law of prosperity is a quiet, unassuming housewife who constantly looks up, boldly sending forth the money in her pocketbook with a rich flourish. Unfailingly, she is provided for in opulent ways. Several years ago, she became interested in beautifying the church in which I was then serving. Quietly, she came to me and suggested various improvements which she would like to make, assuring me that she had private funds to do this. It was months later that I learned the private funds she had were her own grocery money, which she generously used for some lovely items for the church. In that way, she began to send forth with a rich flourish the money she had. As she continued to look up, her every private need was met. New channels of supply opened to her and her husband in most unexpected ways, so that for the first time in her life she employed a maid, received gifts of a new car, and a monthly allowance. As for the church redecoration, it snowballed, and many rich gifts then came, all because one housewife dared to quietly look up and use the substance at hand boldly, fearlessly, richly, even if that substance was her own grocery money. It overwhelms me even now to realize what faith she has had in the vacuum law of prosperity and what rich results she continues to experience. She has often said that she has had no financial need that has not been met since she began forming a vacuum. Put your best foot forward. Another way to look up, regardless of financial appearances, is to put your best foot forward. Wear your best clothes. Look your best. Live as richly as possible on what you already have. I recall once needing new clothes for a conference I was required to attend, but there seemed no money on hand for new clothes. When I prayed about the matter, I got the feeling that I should begin wearing my very best clothes in order to help me feel rich. Every day for almost a week, I wore my best dress over and over. One day, a gift of money was sent to me for some services I had rendered in the past. Of course, I immediately shopped for the desired new clothes. When you have released, let go, and formed a vacuum for new prosperity, that is the time to do whatever you can to affect the rich feeling, the rich atmosphere, the rich look with your present substance. Mention the apparent lack or vacuum to no one. Speaking of economic lack and limitation keeps many people in the poorhouse financially. Never think of yourself as poor or needy. Do not talk about hard times or the necessity for strict economy. Do not think of how little you have, but how much you have. As you form a vacuum and let go of what you do not want, as you use your present visible supply to meet the immediate needs as best you can, not withholding it, and as you live as richly as possible in the face of appearances, the rich results will begin to come forth. Almost mysteriously, new channels of supply will appear to meet your needs. You will discover other financial assets in your midst, of which you were previously unaware, to meet your needs. Other people will unknowingly do things to add to your supply too. In quietness and confidence is your strength when there is a need for greater prosperity. If you dare to look up, bless, and break the substance at hand in whatever way seems best. Always ask for divine guidance concerning the practical as well as the spiritual ways in which you may form a vacuum for new prosperity when these financial needs loom upon you. Don't get panicky. This is just further opportunity for you to prove that the invisible laws of prosperity can produce visible, satisfying results. This is just your initiation in the power of prosperous thinking. If you learn how to form a vacuum for new good early in your conscious development of prosperous thinking, then you do not panic at financial challenges, but know you can and shall meet them victoriously and be much richer in the long run for having learned how to use the invisible laws of supply to meet visible needs. Often, when you are forming a vacuum by using what you have, you find that the amount on hand is sufficient, that too much is wasted or spoiled, and that amount, which at first seems small or even insufficient, becomes adequate as you use it fearlessly. It even seems to supply you during that period when no more substance immediately appears, if you continue to use it fearlessly and in the faith that every need is being met. Make room for your good. We all want better financial conditions, and we should have them, but there is a way to obtain them. Do not talk about financial lack, but begin thinking in terms of the rich, universal abundance that is everywhere. Then learn to let go, to give up, to make room for the things you have prayed for, worked for, and so strongly desire. As you give up and cast away old ideas, attitudes, old possessions, and put in their place new ideas of prosperity and progressive achievement, your conditions will steadily improve. You always want something better than you now have. It is the urge of progress. Just as children outgrow their clothes, you outgrow former ideals, broaden your horizons of life as you advance. There must be constant elimination of the old to keep pace with this growth. When you cling to the old, you hinder your advance or stop it altogether. Why not dare to form a vacuum now and invite that complete prosperity and success which you have so yearned to experience and which is divinely meant for you? The Creative Law of Prosperity, Chapter 4. Let us get down to business about prosperity. Now that you have formed a vacuum, you are ready to fill that vacuum with rich, new good through the creative law of prosperity. Actually, the creative law of prosperity concerns the three basic steps given in this chapter and the next two. 1. Having a plan, writing out one's desires concerning that plan, and constantly expanding that plan. 2. Mentally imagining that plan and those plans desired as fulfilled. 3. Constantly affirming their perfect fulfillment. However, the first part of the creative law, as discussed in this chapter, is all important because without a plan and notes concerning it, the other two steps are ineffective. Strong desire is success power. The first step in the creative law of prosperity is desire and the ability to do something constructive about that desire. Recently, a businessman told me he has discovered in his work that when a customer comes to him greatly desiring certain products, he has found it best always to sell that customer what he really desires. This businessman said that even though he personally may feel that there are other products that would better serve his customer, if his customer has already made up his mind and strongly desires certain products, he never tries to change that desire because desire is so impelling. He stated that strong desire denotes faith in the product, which almost inevitably brings satisfaction. There is nothing weak or lukewarm about true desire. It is intense and powerful. If properly developed and expressed, a strong desire always carries with it the power for success. The stronger your desires for good, the greater the power of your desires to produce that good for you. I have discovered in counseling people who have various problems that the right kind of desire will dissolve anything that has stood in the way of fulfillment. Right desire is truly the first step in solving problems and getting on the road to prosperity. How can you release your deep-seated desires for prosperity and success? By centering your attention on one big goal at a time. One big goal always includes a number of smaller desires that are automatically fulfilled when the big one is achieved. Psychologists agree that we influence people and events by having great desires and great goals. It is as though everything and everybody subconsciously tunes in on our big desires and goals and gets busy helping us to achieve them. The amazing thing is that of the millions of people who think they want to be successful, few of them have any really strong, impelling desires. They have been content to idly drift in a stream of small events and small expectations. When you meet a person who is really going places in this world, usually it is a person of intense desire for the highest and best in life. One of the basic statements I've often asked people to use to help expand and intensify their constructive desires is, I desire the highest and best in life, and I now draw the highest and best to me. Write down your desires. The law of creative prosperity is to take your deep-seated desires and instead of suppressing them as impossible dreams, begin expressing them constructively through deciding what they really are and then doing something very simple but very powerful about them. Write them down. That is, make a list or draw up some kind of potential plan which you should feel free to change, revise, reform, and rearrange as your ideas about it unfold. This idea of writing out your desires and formulating a plan on paper clarifies the desires in your mind, and the mind produces definite results only when it has been given definite ideas through which to work. Many people work hard at prosperity in external ways, but they miss the mark because they are afraid to get definite in their thoughts and desires. They want to live better and to have more money, but they never get definite in their desires about how they want to live better or how much more money they need. In fact, many people hesitate to get definite, fearing that they are telling God what to do. But as Dr. Emily Cady once wrote, desire is God tapping at the door of your mind, trying to give you greater good. If you suppress those deep desires, they have no constructive outlet and often turn into destructive channels expressed as neurotic tendencies, phobias, tension, or perhaps as suppression that finds outlet through alcoholism, mental illness, dope addiction, sexual imbalance, or other negative actions. The power of writing out one's desires and plans was first proved to me by my former boss, Joe Talley, a number of years ago. One day, just after he had been defeated in a congressional race, instead of feeling sorry for himself, he immediately got busy formulating a new plan. He stated his desire for larger law offices, his desire for the expansion from a 2-man firm to a 5- or 6-man firm, and the desire to increase the annual income he wished the firm to attain year by year for the next 5 years. At that time, I did not know that this was one of the most powerful methods for attaining success. It seemed so simple. Nevertheless, I watched his scribbled plan come to life and fruition. The law firm gradually expanded into a 5-man arrangement in which each attorney specialized in certain phases of legal practice. The firm moved from 2 small offices into spacious new quarters that occupied the entire floor of a modern new bank building. Nothing succeeds like success was surely manifested for Joe Talley after he formulated a plan, dared to put it in writing, and started moving toward it. Prosperity is a planned result. A stockbroker's story further proves the power of formulating plans for prosperity and success. A few years ago, the president of a large corporation died. At the time of his death, this corporation was in financial difficulties. The vice president, who had been considered outstanding in a financial way, then took the helm. Immediately, this corporation began to prosper, and today its stock is one of the best on the market. Its sales records during recent years have superseded those of all its well-known competitors. The prosperity secret? Well, it seems that this vice president had for years worked on a plan he felt wise for the growth and prosperity of this corporation. The day he became president, he took that plan out of his desk drawer and began executing it. Today, his corporation is no longer a mediocre one with indebtedness pulling it down. Instead, it is one of the most prosperous in the country. He proved that prosperity is a planned result. Prosperity is the result of deliberate thought and action. There is nothing hit and miss about prosperous living. It is a planned result, just as a bridge or building is a planned result. Without deliberate, prosperous plans, there would be no prosperous results on a consistent, permanent basis. This law of creative prosperity was one that has surely clicked with the students of my prosperity classes. Many of the business people who attended told me that this one idea turned their previous faltering efforts towards prosperity into amazingly successful results. They had worked long and hard, but not in definite or specific ways. Then they discovered there was no reason to be afraid to ask for what they really desired. The Bible promises, "Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and the door shall be opened." Perhaps you are thinking that you do not really know what you want, that your desires are not that definite as yet. In that case, simply begin thinking about and even making lists of what you don't want in your life that is there. List the things you wish cleared up and eradicated from your life. To that list declare, "This too shall pass," or "Be thou dissolved." I know of a man in the electrical business who did this. His business partner had died months earlier, leaving his share of the business in the hands of uncooperative heirs who would neither buy nor sell. It was almost in desperation that the surviving partner began applying prosperous thinking. His main desire was either to buy the other half of the business or sell his half. He simply wanted to dissolve the deadlock which was costing the business money, and he wanted to eradicate the unpleasantness, confusion, and uncertainty of his business situation. Within a month after he wrote out notes about the unpleasantness and uncertainty being dissolved, he received word from a lawyer that his partner's heirs would sell. They did immediately with no further ado. A prosperity formula. One group of business people that experimented with me on prosperous thinking during a recent recession did this. They first wrote out their desires for 6 months hence, then wrote out their desired achievements for each month of the 6. Each week they added to their list or changed their list of desired results as they felt led. In some instances, they changed the list completely, expanding their desires or crossing off desires that no longer appealed to them. Then each week, the class members brought me these listed desires to class. No one ever saw these individual lists except each student. We began each class period by privately taking our lists in hand and verbally declaring together concerning them, "I am the rich child of a loving Father. All that the Father has is mine to share and to experience. Divine intelligence is now showing me how to claim my own God-given wealth, health, and happiness. Divine intelligence is even now opening the way for my immediate blessings. I have faith that all that is mine by divine right now comes to me in rich abundance. My rich blessings do not interfere with anyone else's good, since God's rich substance is unlimited and everywhere for all to use. There is no delay. That which is not for my highest good now fades from me, and I no longer desire it. My God-given desires are richly fulfilled now in God's own wonderful way. The students were also instructed to spend at least 15 minutes a day pouring their verbal prayers and blessings, which we will talk about in the 6th chapter, upon their listed desires, and daily to work on their lists, revising, changing, expanding them. They were asked to do very definite things, such as listing the amount of money they wished to make for the day, week, or month. They were also asked to place a time limit and definite dates by which they wished the fulfillment of their desires. They were further instructed not to wonder, doubt, or question how their rich good was to be fulfilled, but they were to stay busy putting the creative laws of prosperity into action in these simple ways. The results they attained were fabulous, and I have received letters from people all over the world who read of this creative method of prosperity and who tried it with similar prosperous results. As the group worked with their lists, revising and changing them, we often affirmed the words of Joth. What you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. We often declared, what we can conceive, we can achieve with the help of God. And we often reminded ourselves of this truth. Every obstacle rushes to get out of the way of the man who knows where he is going, and all the world seems to be on the side of the man who tries to rise. There seems to be almost magical power in thinking of one's desires, expressing them constructively by writing them down, stating the time by which one wishes their fulfillment, then praying that God's good will be done in the matter. Does it sound too simple to work? Great truths and powerful secrets often appear simple. So simple, in fact, that the average person overlooks them in trying to find a more difficult way. Write a letter to God. One businesswoman invoked the creative method of prosperity in a slightly different way. At the first of the year, instead of making a lot of New Year's resolutions, she wrote a letter to God in which she honestly listed all of her desires for the new year. She then placed the sealed letter in her Bible. Toward the end of the year, she showed me that letter, which had specifically listed many things. All of the big desires she had expressed had been fulfilled. She was widowed and had expressed a desire to marry happily again. Toward the end of the year, I performed a private wedding ceremony for her and the bridegroom, whom she had met through friends after writing out that desire. She had also stated in the letter her desire for a better home. The bridegroom gave it to her. Her other big desire had been for a better job. In the middle of that year, too, had come forth as a pleasant, satisfying, higher-paying position. But I must caution you, be honest with yourself when you write out your desires. Express, as did this woman, your really deep feelings. Don't write out what somebody else wants for you or what you think you should desire. Be honest with yourself and your Maker if you really want happy results. I know of another businesswoman who wrote a similar letter to God at the first of the year, but instead of writing out her deep and big desires, she listed in a lukewarm, half-hearted way some of her surface and smaller desires. The things really gnawing at her heart were not even mentioned, and nothing happened. Because she had kept her really deep desires locked within her, there had been no open channel through which God's substance could pour forth its rich good to her. A loving Father always wants you to have better than the best than you are now experiencing, because the kingdom of heaven is at hand. If you wish God's help in experiencing it, the least you can do is to be honest with Him and with yourself. Otherwise, you block any possibility of fulfillment. Perhaps you are thinking, yes, but what if my desires are not of the highest? Should I still be honest and list them? Certainly, because by being honest, you are releasing them instead of suppressing them. And as you release and face them, a loving Father can help you readjust them for good. I have observed this principle work in counseling people who wanted spiritual help, but who would perhaps feel that their problem was embarrassing or shocking. They would speak of their lesser problems, but would keep the thing which was really bothering them tight within them. It was only when they got at the heart of their problems that the answer and divine solution could come forth. Make a daily list. The creative method of writing out one's desires proved so effective for a friend who has a modeling school that she recorded on tape specific instructions about making lists, revising them daily, etc. She plays that tape as a part of her modeling school course of instruction. The result? Scores of her students have obtained jobs of their choice in fashion modeling as well as in television and radio work after faithfully making specific lists of the work they desired, the pay they desired, the hours they wanted to work, and the working conditions they hoped for. Another simple but effective way of invoking the creative law of prosperity is by beginning and ending your day making notes and lists. In the morning, I always sit quietly for a few minutes, often with a cup of coffee, while I think of my day and the many big and little things I wish to see accomplished by myself and others. I make lists of those desired accomplishments. It only takes a few minutes, which is time well spent, because I then feel in control of my day. I usually write a note of thanks to God at the end of that list for divine fulfillment and the divine achievements. It is amazing how many things are taken care of for me without my doing anything more than listing them and giving thanks for their divine fulfillment. In like manner, at the end of the day, I take another few minutes, go back over the day, and write thank you notes to God for the blessings received and the good accomplished. I usually also begin thinking of the following day and make some notes concerning its perfect fulfillment. It seems to assure me of a peaceful mind and a restful night. I have found this practice of making morning and evening lists so satisfying and enlightening because there are always more blessings to list than expected, that I now feel something is amiss if I do not observe this daily ritual. Things rarely go wrong in my day if I stick to my list making. Many people use this method. In case this list-making technique is beginning to sound slightly trivial to you, let me assure you that it is a success technique used by a number of successful people, more than most of us realize, because they do not advertise their success secrets. Two prominent engineers have confidentially shown me little books that they keep in an inside coat pocket, which they take out when things become hectic during their business day, and in which they quickly make notations of the way they wish things to work out. No one suspects what they are doing, and so in the midst of people all around them, they quickly gain control of the various problems that confront them with their list making. Recently, a mother in one of my classes asked her son, who is a young business executive, about a special course of instruction that he was currently studying with his company. He explained that he had been instructed to use a new psychological technique in solving his executive problems. This course had taught him that the proper modem method for solving problems was to sit down quietly, write out the problem, write out what he considered the highest and best solution, then tear up his notes and relax, knowing that his solution or something better would work out, since he had been able to work out a possible solution in his mind and on paper. This executive was quite surprised when his mother informed him she had been using that method for many months, having learned it at our study class. A doctor's financial income was boosted considerably within a few weeks after he began to write out the financial sum that he wished his practice to bring in each week. Previously, he had tried thinking in terms of boosted monthly income, but the figures had seemed too large for him to accept mentally. When he brought it down to a weekly level, it seemed easier for his mind to accept the idea of the weekly increase, and so it quickly manifested. I agree with the writer of the book of Proverbs when he instructed us, "Let not kindness and truth forsake thee. Bind them about thy neck. Write them upon the tablet of thy heart. So shalt thou find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and man." When you are trying to find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and man, the writing out technique is indeed powerful. Write to their angel. If you seek understanding regarding financial matters, it is good to secretly write out notes to those involved. Seal those notes and place them in your Bible for the time being. The mystics used to teach that everyone has an angel or higher self, and that when we cannot reach that angel in the usual ways, we should secretly write to it. In fact, the mystics even went so far as to describe 7 types of people with whom it is easier to deal satisfactorily by writing their angel than by trying to reason with them in the usual ways. Perhaps you are thinking, I am sure that is fine mysticism, but how practical is this angel writing method? Well, you should realize that anyone you are having difficulty with, you have not been able to reach in the usual ways. So what have you to lose by secretly trying to reach them through their higher self or angel? A businessman was having difficulty closing a business matter which had long been pending. Everyone involved was quite congenial and wished to conclude this matter, except one man who kept changing his mind and who seemed quite unsure about everything. This man kept things unsettled. In desperation, this businessman decided to try the angel writing method. It seems that the man giving the trouble was timid, apprehensive, always fearful about something. The businessman secretly wrote out just the opposite. To the angel of, let us say, John Brown, I bless you and give thanks that you are bringing to a perfect conclusion this business matter, and that all concerned are satisfied and blessed by it. This businessman wrote out this statement 15 times, because he had learned that the ancients believed in using the number 15 to break up and dissolve hard conditions. Within a few days, this businessman telephoned me long distance to report that the person causing the difficulty had visited his office and had said, "Come down to my office tomorrow morning and the papers will be ready for signatures. This situation has been delayed too long and I am anxious to conclude it." The transaction was quickly completed. Note writing gets the bills paid. Another note-writing technique that is particularly helpful in getting the bills paid is this. When those bills begin to arrive in the mail, instead of silently resenting them, write on the envelopes, "I give thanks for your immediate and complete payment. You are immediately and completely paid through the rich avenues of divine substance." It is also good when the bills have already piled up to make a list of those owed and the amount owing, and beside or beneath each one to write out the same statement concerning their immediate payment. A businessman once brought a file folder full of bills and said, "How can I possibly use the power of prosperous thinking to get these paid? Some of them are several months old." We then sat for an hour or so making a list of the amounts owed and to whom, listing first those owed the longest and those which were the most urgent. We then wrote out the above statement about their immediate payment. Since it seemed humanly impossible to pay all these bills immediately, we then made a second list showing the ones that should be absolutely paid within the next week, along with the statement, "I give thanks that you are immediately and completely paid by blank," and listed the date a week hence. Once a week, this businessman came with his file folder of bills, and we watched them get paid step by step. It took about 2 months to completely bring his financial affairs up to date. When he did, it was agreed that he would use this same technique at the first of each month to get current bills paid on time. This method seemed to help him gain control in his thinking about his financial affairs. Once he gained mental dominion, he was able to meet his financial obligations on time. Woe unto them that write about their troubles. It was Isaiah who advised us, "Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and to writers that write perverseness." This surely applies to one's financial affairs. A man I know was having business difficulties. At the start, they were not too urgent, and with a change of attitudes could doubtless have been solved easily. Not realizing this, in his worried state of mind, this man began writing about his difficulties in detail to a number of his friends. As he magnified the difficulty in his mind and in the minds of others, it literally multiplied in his affairs. After he began to apply prosperous thinking to the situation, it took him several months to clear it up. He found it necessary to stop talking about his troubles to others and to stop putting anything negative in writing. When he started reversing the process and secretly writing about how he wished his business affairs to be, his difficulties began to diminish for the first time in months. In like manner, it is good in the face of adverse appearances to secretly write out each day how you wish your affairs might be in contrast to how they appear. Not only does that help your mind to accept the improvement you desire, but it is though your written-out desire goes out into the ethers and is subconsciously tuned in on, and everyone concerned begins to cooperate and help. Again, it may seem a mystical method, but if it produces practical, helpful results for you, why not dare to be a modern mystic? Gain control of your past and future. It is also good to gain control of the past or future by writing out statements concerning them. I find in counseling people that many are still living in the past and regretting past mistakes, but the backward look keeps you from going forward and making present and future progress. I also realize that many fine people are afraid of the future. In either event, write out how you wish things might have been concerning some past mistake, or how you wish your life to be in the present and in the future. When you write out notes about how you wish past events might have been that proved disappointing, it seems to take the sting out of the memory of those events. I have known of several instances where those involved in past unhappy experiences would write, telephone, or appear to say the incident no longer mattered, and that all were forgiven concerning it. In some instances, better relationships than ever were happily reestablished between those who had experienced past bitter grievances and misunderstandings. In like manner, if there is some future event that seems to threaten you, take control of it in your thinking by making lists concerning the way you wish it to be. If there is a business conference about which you are unsure, write out the names of all involved and write out definite statements of harmony, understanding, and perfect results that you desire to see come forth. Since there is no time factor in the mental realm, your mind can project itself into a future experience and can prepare harmony and right results ahead of time, so that everything will move easily, quickly, and successfully. The mind is a man's wonderful servant when he realizes this and trains his mind to work for him. One of the most successful young executives I have ever met told me that while he was still in his teens, he wrote out a 12-year plan of progress for himself, which has amazingly manifested itself for him. Although he is still under 30, he is considered wealthy, and it has been predicted that he will surely become a millionaire within the next 10 years. This method is all-powerful. The creative law of prosperity can be all-powerful for producing success and happiness concerning your past, your present, and even your future. There are desires that all of us wish to see come into visible expression and to grow into fine results. Why not begin quietly joining countless others in producing greater good in your life through these creative methods for prosperity? Begin now by first asking yourself just what it is that you honestly desire most in your life. Be specific, be definite, and sincere with yourself. Then write down your dominant desires. Thereafter, declare in privacy, without telling anyone what you are doing, the divine fulfillment of your desires. Declare, I give thanks for the immediate, complete, divine fulfillment of these desires. This or something better comes forth with perfect timing, according to God's rich good for me. Then daily change and revise your lists as you feel led. Spend at least 15 minutes a day on your list. Dare to persist in this simple procedure and then get ready for a landslide of happy results. More than you have dreamed possible will come your way because God's friendly universe wishes you to be prospered and blessed. Again, I wish to remind you of the promise of Goethe. What you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Why not prove it now? As one prosperous thinker has often said to me, I find the results really begin to come forth only after I start towards them. The creative methods I have presented here are simple but provable ways of helping you start towards your good. After you do start toward your good, however, don't be surprised if it rushes forth to meet you more than halfway. The Imaging Law of Prosperity, Chapter 5. Once you have made your lists, work with them daily in changing, expanding, and revising them. There is another step you are ready to take. At this point, the imaging power of the mind, which has an almost magical power, should be invoked to work for you. We are told in this modern age by authorities who are making a study of the mind that man can create anything he can imagine. But the mental image does make the conditions and experiences of man's life and affairs, that man's only limitation lies in the negative use of his imagination. In other words, if there is failure and lack in your life, it is because you first imagined it in your mind. You first set up life's limitations in your mind, and it is likewise in mind that you can begin dissolving those limitations and remaking your life into what you wish it to be. It was the French doctor Émile Coué who first declared that the imagination is a much stronger force than willpower, and that when the imagination and will are in conflict, the imagination always wins out. We have seen this proved in hypnosis. Often when a mental picture is first suggested, the will does not want to accept that picture. But when the mental picture is repeated sufficiently, the imagination has no choice but to accept it and to bring it to pass, no matter how unlikely the mental picture appears to the reasoning power of the will. As we study these various laws of prosperous thinking, we are not being hypnotized, however. Instead, we are being de-hypnotized from the ignorant, superstitious, limited beliefs of centuries of poverty thinking. Since you are hoping for greater good in your life, you should begin to form the mental image of it in your mind. Your reasoning power may tell you that it can never be, but that doesn't matter. Your will may say your dream is too big to come true, that it is impossible to fulfill. But if you just dare to continue imagining it that way, then your imagination will go to work for you to produce the visible result you have been imaging. And in due time, your will can work for you also. Whatever the mind is taught to expect, that it will build, produce, and bring forth for you. History proves the power of imaging. History has proved this many times. Perhaps you recall the facts connected with the Peloponnesian War of ancient Greece. This war was significant because it lasted for 27 years. You will probably remember why it is believed to have lasted so long. Historians say that both sides lacked purpose or strategy. They had no particular plan for victory, and so they just drifted along indefinitely, never quite losing, yet never quite winning the war, just fighting. Finally, a Spartan of foresight and ability, obviously a man who knew how to image victory and success, appeared on the scene, went into action, and led his side to victory. Historians write that in one single hour he brought the long war to an end. And how did he do it? Was it through battle and bloodshed? Absolutely not. Instead, he led the enemy to believe they had his ships and men cornered at the entrance of the Dardanelles. There he waited patiently for 4 days until the enemy became sure of themselves, thinking that his silence signified weakness and inability to fight. On the 5th day, when they sent most of their crew ashore to get food, Admiral Lysander suddenly came to life, sailed out, and captured almost the entire fleet of 180 ships without a single blow. Often we have been like those ancient Greeks. We had no plan or image of victory, and so we just went along, never quite winning, never quite losing in life, just fighting. It was in 500 BC that Sun Tzu wrote, "In all fighting, the direct method may be used for joining battle, but indirect methods will be needed in order to secure victory." When you use the all-powerful imaging power of the mind to envision your good, you are using the indirect method that will secure the victory over life's problems for you. Instead of battling with poverty, failure, and financial lack, which often only multiplies your problems, begin using the indirect method, that of quietly, deliberately, and persistently imaging your good. Success created mentally first. In the book of Genesis, we are told how Joseph proved the power of the imagination for success and prosperity. From him we learn what to do and what not to do with our imagination. In Joseph's dreams at the age of 17, he had dominion over the situations about which he dreamed. In one dream, his brother's sheaves were bowing down to Joseph's sheaf. In another dream, the sun, moon, and stars were honoring Joseph. These dreams were symbolic of the dominion Joseph was to have later as prime minister of Egypt. Joseph dreamed of dominion, and so must you. Joseph dreamed of dominion when he seemed to have none, and so must you. Success is created mentally first, But Joseph made the mistake of telling his dreams to his jealous brothers, who resented his claims of dominion. So they sold him for 20 pieces of silver to some Ishmaelite merchants on their way to Egypt. Unlike Joseph, you should not tell your dreams and mental images of greater good to others, who will only try to tear down your pictures of grandeur with their doubt and unbelief. After Joseph was sold into Egyptian slavery, he apparently continued to image better than the best he was then experiencing. He proved that vision is victory. He also proved that the victim can become the victor. When he arrived in Egypt, he had to meet a number of unjust experiences before the tide turned for him. Only after years in prison and many tribulations did Joseph become prime minister of all Egypt, second in command of the most powerful empire of that age. Persist in picturing success. Sometimes the imaging power of the mind produces immediate results for you. But if, like Joseph, it takes longer, you can be assured that the results will be even bigger when they do come, provided you do not get discouraged and give up. The longer it takes your mental images to produce results, the bigger they will be, if you hold on to them. The truth of this was recently brought to my attention by a businessman who revealed to me how the imaging law of prosperity took him from a truck driver's job to wealthy retirement in 10 years. In 1940, this man was a truck driver. He lived in a rented house with his wife and children. They did not even own a car. He was making $25 a week and barely getting by. He then heard about the imaging power of the mind, and he decided to find out if it really worked. He began mentally to image the standard of living he wanted for himself and his family. He decided that he wanted his own business, that he wanted to be financially independent, that he wanted to own his own spacious, comfortable home, that he wanted to own at least 2 cars, that he wanted his wife to feel completely free to shop anytime she wished, without having to pinch pennies out of the grocery money or run up charge accounts all over town. In every possible way, he mentally imaged a high standard of living and income for himself and his family. Within a year, he had been made sales manager instead of a truck driver for his company. But he still did not have the house, cars, or his own business and financial independence. When Christmas came that year, he said to his family, "I believe that by next year at this season, we will have our own home and our own car sitting in the driveway." But at the next holiday season, a year later, they were still living in a rented house with no car of their own. His children then reminded him of his previous prediction, and he replied, "Don't give up hope. Perhaps I made that prediction a little too soon, but we will have those blessings, and soon." By the next holiday season, they had moved into a new home, and there was not 1 but 2 new cars in the driveway. This man stated that after he began imaging the prosperous standard of living he wished, while still a $25 a week truck driver, it actually took him 2 years to convince his own thinking that it was possible, and to get his mind to accept those rich mental pictures. But he declared that after his mind was fully convinced he could become prosperous, it was like breaking a hard shell. Suddenly, success began to come so fast he could hardly keep up with it. It was then that the house and 2 cars appeared. This man further stated that it took him 6 years from the time he began to image a high standard of living to completely achieve his goal. But within 6 years after he began imaging prosperity on a grand scale, he had attained it in the insurance business. Within 10 years, he had made so much money, he retired. In fact, he concluded his story on the imaging power of prosperity by saying, "I went from a penniless truck driver to a fortune in insurance in 10 years, but that was only my first fortune. I have now tired of retirement and plan to make my second fortune during this next 10-year period through the same method, by imaging it." The power of a master plan. Charles Fillmore once described the terrific power of imagination when he wrote, "Imagination gives man the ability to project himself through time and space and rise above all limitations." One of Mr. Fillmore's sons, who was an architect and official of Unity School of Christianity, proved that this can be done. In 1926, Rickert Fillmore drew up a master plan for the growth of Unity Village. In this master plan, he drew all of the buildings, walkways, fountains, and even the shrubs that were to beautify Unity School. Finally, in 1929, 2 of the buildings, the Unity Tower and the Silent Unity Building, were completed. Because of economic conditions during the Depression era that followed, no more building was undertaken for 11 years. But Rickard Fillmore persisted in his vision by going right ahead and landscaping the grounds, even filling in shrubs around the future buildings. I remember hearing him tell at a ministers' conference how he sat in his office located in the Unity Tower during those years of non-building, and how he would look out over the Unity grounds where the prospective buildings were to be erected. He would image them as already there, picturing how they would look in every detail. After years of his faithful imaging, beginning in 1940, a number of other beautiful buildings were constructed. The beauty of Unity Village is now enjoyed by visitors from all over the world, who can behold what the imaging power of the mind had accomplished there. Make a wheel of fortune. Truly, nothing is impossible for the imagination to accomplish. But perhaps you are thinking, I am not yet well versed enough in the imaging power of the mind to get results as you have described. Isn't there some simple way I can begin training my imagination to produce such results for me? Yes, there is. An engineer in my last prosperity class devised a practical method for training the imagination to produce rich results. He designed a wheel of fortune to help project his mind through time and space, thereby rising above present limitations and bringing forth happy results. After this engineer began to use the imaging power of the mind through his wheel of fortune, he went into a multi-million-dollar construction job, which he is still working on in the Midwest. This wheel of fortune he designed has fascinated and helped scores of people. For instance, some ministerial friends of mine told me that they used his Wheel of Fortune idea for a short period and realized a lifetime dream by taking a trip to Europe. Another ministerial friend told me that after she made a vacation Wheel of Fortune, she was able to take her sick mother to Florida in the middle of winter for the warm sunshine which the doctors had prescribed for her. Through a series of events that brought about that Florida trip, they were offered a friend's house on the beach at the height of the winter season, free of charge. There they made friends with neighbors who invited them into their homes for happy social events during their stay. Another result was that this minister was given a beautiful fur coat by one of these new friends just before she returned home to the cold weather. Actually, the Wheel of Fortune idea is a very simple method for putting the imagination to work for you. The engineer made his Wheel of Fortune in this way. On a large piece of poster board, he drew a round circle that encompassed most of the space. In the center of this circle, he placed a picture of some religious idea or scene that denotes a higher power. This could be a picture of the Bible, the Lord's Prayer, or whatever religious symbol means most to you. Under this center circle, he typed the following words: Divine intelligence is in charge of my life. I am now open, receptive, and obedient to its rich instruction and guidance. This formed the innermost part of his Wheel of Fortune. This idea was its hub. For this innermost part, he drew 4 lines to the circumference of the circle. After dividing his wheel into 4 parts, he then labeled the 4 parts: business, family, spiritual, social, and recreational. In each of these 4 parts, he then placed pictures of the results he desired to achieve in those 4 phases of life. For instance, in the business phase, he placed pictures concerning the perfect engineering job he wished as a result of a job transfer which was pending. Under this picture, he placed these words: I am now activated by divine intelligence, motivated by divine love, and guided by divine power into my right work, which I perform in a perfect way for perfect pay. The divine plan of my life now takes shape in definite concrete experiences, leading to perfect health, happiness, success, and prosperity. In the family phase of his Wheel of Fortune, he placed a picture of his present home and under it these words, since it would be necessary to sell that house because of his job transfer. Divine intelligence directs the right buyer to this property. Everyone concerned is blessed by a just and orderly exchange of values. He also placed a picture of a new home and under it these words: Divine intelligence knows our need. knows where the right house is, and knows how to manifest it to us at the right time. To help his wife through the transition period of moving and readjustment that would come as the result of this job transfer, he placed her picture in this area too, and under it these words: "My wife is now motivated by divine intelligence and divine love. She is also guided by divine power, which now manifests in her every experience as perfect health, happiness, abundance, and success." For their ability to go forth to new experiences in faith, he placed on their wheel of fortune the picture of a door and under it these words: "As one door closes, another bigger and better door opens." In the social and recreational phase of his wheel of fortune, he placed the picture of a sandy beach with an ocean background under which went the prayers: "We give thanks for the divinely planned vacation under divinely planned conditions with the divinely planned and divinely manifest supply." For his general prosperity, he added these words: "I am now guided by divine intelligence, so that divine order is established and maintained in all my financial affairs." In the last part of his wheel of fortune, the spiritual phase, he placed the picture of a church under which he wrote: "I am grateful that faith abides in my heart, and I am divinely guided to the right church in my new surroundings." Near these words, he also placed a picture of a Bible. He then placed this wheel of fortune with its pictures and words in a spot where he could privately view it and go over it every day. These simple words and pictures helped his imaging power of the mind to go to work for him. In a few weeks, he was informed that his job transfer would be the biggest promotion he had ever received. For the first time in his engineering career, he would enjoy complete freedom of action, with responsibility only to the vice president of the company. As he continued to view his wheel of fortune, he became so confident that their present home would be sold on time that he and his wife went to the new job assignment in a distant state and immediately found the perfect place to live. They then proceeded to set a date to come back and arrange to move their furniture, a date by which they confidently expected their house to be sold. They went so far in faith as to make their plane reservations on that date to fly back so as to be present for the sale of their house. After they confidently set the dates and made their plans, everything they had expected began working out on time. Their house was sold on time, and their furniture was moved to their new home on the dates they had planned. After getting settled in their new location, they took a vacation in a lovely tropical area where there were sandy beaches along the ocean, as their wheel of fortune had indicated. Later, they were guided to the perfect church for them in their new location, as pictured on their wheel of fortune. Thus did this engineer prove, in working with the imaging power of the mind, what he already knew to be true in his engineering profession from working with blueprints. Results have to be planned and then visualized before they can become a living reality. Napoleon used the imaging law. Before you can discount this as just one man's way of making his imagination work for him, let me assure you that one of the most powerful figures in history used the Wheel of Fortune idea to win many a battle and to achieve world fame. Napoleon kept a huge map before him with colored flags indicating the various moves he planned for his armies to take months in advance. He even used the prosperity technique of writing down his desires and plans so as to clarify them and start them into action from the invisible realm. In one instance, historians say that he dictated in detail the order and length of the marches, the meeting places of the two armies, the attack, the movements of the enemy, and even the blunders he expected the enemy to make, all 2 months before it happened and at a distance of 600 or 700 miles away from the scene. But Napoleon met his Waterloo, because he, in a great measure, used destructively the very techniques that are so powerful for good when used in a positive, constructive manner. This turns the tide of your thinking. Thus, if you want something very much that seems completely out of reach, make a Wheel of Fortune. They are powerful because they turn the current of your thought and expectation from I can't have to I can have, from despair to hope, from discouragement to encouragement, from failure to success. If you do not wish to make a Wheel of Fortune for all the departments of your life, make it for your main desire, perhaps for the one big thing you would like to experience in life, which so far has evaded you. A friend of mine makes what she calls quickie wheels of fortune for a period of 1 month, on which she places pictures and phrases concerning the things needed for that short period of time. She says that by expecting immediate results, her mind seems to go to work for her much faster to produce an immediate result. Whereas if she makes wheels of fortune for longer periods, somehow her imagination isn't sufficiently stimulated to do much about it. Make a notebook of your desires. If you are not free to make a large wheel of fortune to help you change your mental images, perhaps you would like to do as did a school teacher I know, who made a notebook similar to the kind she constantly carries around in her work. Only this notebook contained pictures she had cut from magazines of the good she desired, along with catchy phrases she had clipped and pasted about them. When she had a lull in her day, she would browse through her notebook of desires, which kept her imaging power uplifted, expectant, and at work for her highest good. No one around her was aware of what she was doing, and in this simple way she was able to avoid becoming depressed, discouraged, or doubtful. Image in detail. A housewife who has used the imaging power of the mind with amazing results has often told me that she has to work for a long time to get her mind to image in detail a desired result. But she declares that once she can picture the complete detailed result, she can then dismiss the matter from her mind completely, knowing it will soon manifest itself. She states that she has found it worth the time and effort to daily picture as much of her desires as possible. Gradually, her imagination is able to image the whole picture in detail. As it does, so she states that often she personally needs to take little or no physical action to produce that result. More often, it is accomplished for her, since her greatest work in the matter had already been done. I am discovering that the imaging law of prosperity is one of the most fascinating. The more you develop it, the more it seems that the whole world rushes toward you in a friendly fashion, only too happy to grant your desires. You constantly image. A very self-righteous type of woman who once indignantly said to me after a lecture I had given on the imagination, "I don't believe in making mental images. That's nothing but mental force." I tried to explain that she was constantly making mental images, whether she wanted to or not, because the mind thinks through mental pictures. It is the natural action of the mind. But this indignant woman rushed out. Later, I began to receive reports of what a hard time she was having financially. Finally, she spoke to a church counselor about her financial difficulties, and the counselor said, "You will continue to have financial problems until you change your mental images. You are thinking about, talking about, and picturing financial lack, and your mind is producing what you are imaging. Change your images and think, talk, and picture plenty, and you shall have it." This time the woman was desperate, and so she began to image prosperous results. Soon she began to experience them. In due time her attitude had changed completely, and she became a beautiful, harmonious, prosperous individual whom everyone loved, whereas she previously had been avoided on every hand because of her constant recitation of financial woe. I agree with that lady that we can use the imaging law of prosperity as mental force. If we try to force good to us that belongs to someone else, if we mentally image what belongs to someone else as ours, we are asking for trouble. We never need to image someone else's good as being taken from them and coming to us. What belongs to another is not ours by divine right. If it was, it would have been given us in the first place. And since it is not ours by divine right, it would do us no good if we got it. How to image unselfishly. You need not covet another person's blessings because his blessings would not satisfy you even if you had them. What belongs to another never quite fits your needs. Instead, when you see something another has that you would like to have, do not covert it or mentally try to image and force it to you. You should realize that his good that appeals to you is simply an indication that similar good is on the way to you and that you can have it. To help bring it to pass, declare to yourself, "I too am in contact with the source of that good. The divine equivalent of that good is now on its way to me, and I gratefully accept it. My own similar God-appointed blessings now appear. They are satisfying and appropriate, and for this I give thanks." Truly, there is no danger in using the imaging power of the mind unselfishly. It is only when you use it selfishly to try to force from another that which you desire that you run into difficulties. In like manner, you should never mentally image for another that which you would not want to experience yourself, since the mental image you send out inevitably comes back to you. Instead, you should image health, wealth, and happiness for others, as well as for yourself. Image success in family problems. A distraught mother whose son's behavior had been especially disturbing began sitting quietly every day and mentally imaging him as she wished him to be. She thought of him as standing in a pool of light and love, as being calm, peaceful, confident, harmonious, and happy. She stopped trying to make him that way in any of her outer actions or words. Gradually, he began to express those qualities and became calm, peaceful, confident, and harmonious, so that in a few months he hardly seemed the same child. I have noted in talking with a number of women whose husbands would go astray and get interested in other women that almost inevitably it happened after the wife began to image her husband as interested in another woman. One wife whose husband had strayed early in their marriage came to me feeling very sorry for herself because she was going through the third other woman experience. As I closely questioned her, I realized that she had begun to wonder what she would do if such a thing happened early in their marriage, and soon it did happen. It happened 3 times before she realized that she had imaged each experience for her husband, and thus she had helped bring it forth. Be careful what you image for yourself or those who are receptive to your mental images, because it will surely happen. You should always give others the benefit of only good mental images. Often life's results are the difference between constructive and destructive mental images that you entertain for yourself and others. The writer might have been describing the power of mental images when he wrote, "Two men looked down from prison bars. One saw the mud, the other saw the stars." What we see depends mainly on what we look for. Image success in financial affairs. I would also suggest that you begin daily developing your imaging power for prosperity and success by taking a little time at the beginning or end of the day, perhaps when you are writing out your plans and notes, to image them in definite form mentally. In other words, if there are bills that you are listing to be paid after making your notes, sit quietly and image the checks already written to those owed in the specific amount. Mentally image yourself putting those checks in envelopes and dropping them in the mailbox. If there is a definite need for some specific amount of money, mentally image a check written out to you, showing a current date and showing the amount of money needed as received on that check. Your imagination loves to be given definite pictures to build and form, which the subconscious mind then greatly accepts and gets busy producing as definite results for you. Actually, you have been using your imaging power all the time, and perhaps you used it to image lack of money, lack of success, and all the things you don't really want in life. Take your wallet and checkbook in your hands during your quiet time. Closing your eyes, mentally image bills of large denomination bulging from the wallet. Mentally image your deposit slips showing large sums of money being deposited into your bank account. Image, 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 all the good that you wish to experience. I know of a businessman who had gone through a period of severe financial lack and who felt he could no longer endure the privations. Realizing the imaging power of the mind, he purchased some play money and placed the bills of large denomination in his wallet, so that every time he opened it, his eyes would first see those large amounts. He declared that soon his imaging power had accepted the picture of large amounts of money in his wallet rather than the previous image of lack. He further stated that never again did he find himself without sufficient money in his wallet to meet his needs. Image for travel. A friend of mine remembered the imaging power of the mind when she wished to travel around the world. She purchased a dress, the pattern of which depicted a map of the world. She wore this dress often, thinking of the trips she would take. Very soon someone started a travel fund for her with a gift of money. As the fund gradually increased, she talked with the travel bureau and tentatively decided on a trip to Europe. Within 6 months from the time she began wearing her dress of the world, her trip to Europe came about. She is still wearing that dress, though, because now she is mentally imaging other trips to other parts of the world. Image beauty and well-being. Mentally image the way you personally wish to dress, look, act, react. Give other people a success and beauty treatment by picturing them as prosperous and successful. I often give people a private beauty treatment by mentally viewing them as wearing more beautiful clothes. It is amazing how often they appear soon in the very clothes I had pictured for them. This is a good way for a man to get his wife to wear better-looking hats. Instead of fussing about the one she currently wears, he should image her hats and appearance as he wishes them to be. It will surprise him how fast she will subconsciously respond. The more you use the imaging power of the mind, the more delightfully will it work for you. You are constantly imaging, whether you have been aware of it or not. So why not take conscious control of your imaging power and produce the health, wealth, and happiness that is yours by divine right? Image your true desires. Let me remind you of something mentioned in the last chapter. Don't compromise in your mental images. Image what you really want, not just what you think you can probably have. Pay no attention to your will and reason, which will try to talk you out of your mental images. Your active imagination will soon take control of your will and put it in its place. If you will first take control of the imagination by feeding it the mental pictures of what you deeply and sincerely want. If you feed your imagination half-hearted, lukewarm mental pictures, that's the kind of results you will get. Since they will not be satisfactory, then you will have to start all over again, imaging what you really want. So do it in the beginning and save yourself double work. Truly, the image does make the condition, but it is up to you to make the image. Realizing this, you can now know that there is no need to fight or force your good to you. Instead, just get busy and quietly image it in detail as you wish it to be, and then declare concerning those images, this or something better. Father, thy unlimited good will be done. It is true that man becomes what he imagines, and that man's continuous imagination is sufficient to remold or create anything. But don't just try to take my word for it. Instead, join with me and many others who are discovering that the imaging power of prosperity is one of the most delightful and powerful of all. The Prosperity Law or Command, Chapter 6. Shakespeare wrote, "There is a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. It is through the law of command that you release this flood tide of good which has been built up through your list-making and mental images. The prosperity law of command is your key to dominion. The word command means to have authority or control. Through an attitude of authority, you can take control of the good which you wish to experience in life. Many people look up at life as though it is a mountain towering over their insignificance. The law of command helps you to move up to the summit and look out over your world with a feeling of authority and control, which then produces like results. The secret of the law of command is this. A positive assertion of the good you wish to experience is often all that is needed to turn the tide of events to produce good for you swiftly and easily. It's amazing how fast doors open to us when we dare to take control of a situation and command our high expectations to manifest themselves. But there's nothing new about the law of command. In Genesis, we are told that the Lord created the earth by commanding, "Let there be," and there was. Actually, the law of command is one of the easiest to use. After having made lists of your desires and after having mentally imaged them as fulfilled, it is then time to release the substance of them into words of decree and command which can move the ethers into action. What you decree, you get, as the Bible promises. For thou shalt decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee, and light shall shine upon thy ways. You command through words. You are now using the law of command because you are constantly making decrees, though often they are the wrong kind of decrees, producing what you do not desire. A businessman recently told me of an acquaintance who had been having trouble with his right arm. Doctors examined it and said there was nothing organically wrong with it. Finally, this man who knew the power of words realized that he had been exclaiming, "I'd give my right arm if I could blank." He stopped using this expression and his arm got well. It was Isaiah who warned us, "Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees." Our woes can often be traced to our thoughtless remarks. Once I prayed with a woman who was having trouble with her feet and legs. Her need for healing seemed acute. Her physician told her that he had done everything possible for her. After we began praying, her condition improved, but a complete healing did not seem to come. One day in our prayer time, I asked her, "Now just ask, Father, what is the truth about this situation? What do I need to do to be healed completely?" And she did. And a little while later, she quietly said, "I have the answer. I recently went into a new business venture and I have not yet made a success of it. I have been foolishly saying, if I could only get on my feet financially. I was on my feet physically when I began making that statement, but soon my feet began giving me trouble. My subconscious mind must have taken my words seriously and got me off my feet, which is what I was decreeing through my idle words." She then declared, "I am going to change that statement and declare that I am financially secure, that I am on my feet financially." And soon she was, both physically and financially. I know of a woman who is quite deaf in one ear. She constantly declares concerning anything she does not wish to hear about, "I'm going to turn a deaf ear to that." Students of the mind have always been taught the power of words. The spiritual leaders of Egypt, India, Persia, China, and Tibet all taught their students to speak only when they had something constructive to say. Knowing the danger of idle talk, they set up a standard to determine whether it was wise to say a thing. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it needful? Even if it is true, if it is not kind, then surely it is not needful. From counseling hundreds of people with financial problems, I have found that 99 times out of 100, they do not solve their problems until they not only know but fully use the law of command. When they begin daily, consciously, and deliberately to assert the good they want, their commands seem to call it forth. Affirmations are a form of command. In modern times, we are hearing about affirmations, which are a form of command. Many are proving that the daily practice of verbal and silent affirmation is the simplest way of invoking the law of command to create good. In fact, the use of affirmations is such a simple way of bringing forth rich results that many people mistrust it, looking for a more complicated path to prosperity. The word affirm means to make firm. Through verbally affirming or declaring the good you want, rather than continuing to talk about what you don't want, you begin to make firm in the mind and in the invisible ethers the good you desire. As you continue to affirm the desired good, it rushes forth as a visible result. You make your world with words. Never underestimate the power of words. You make your world with your words, as did the Lord in the beginning. If you do not like the world you have previously made with words of discord, lack, limitation, and hard times, you can begin building a new world of limitless good and prosperity by changing your words of command and decree. The people in my prosperity classes found the law of command one of the easiest and fastest to produce rich results for them. They took affirmative statements that met their needs and declared them over and over verbally for at least 15 minutes a day, perhaps for 5 minutes 3 times a day. If they were not in circumstances that gave them the privacy to speak aloud the statements, then they would write them out dozens of times. One of the statements of command they used often was, "I love the highest and best in all people. I now draw the highest and best people to me." A salesman discovered that by using the statement, he attracted into his department only people who really intended to buy his merchandise. Daily, consistent use of this commanding statement also helped him to make a number of sales that he previously thought he had lost. In another instance, a sales lady used the statement for 15 minutes each day for several weeks with such success that she became the leading salesperson in the entire store. She was honored by her employers for having sold $44,000 worth of merchandise within a short period. Only 3 other salespeople, all men, sold $30,000 worth of merchandise during this same period. This lady's department included mostly lower-priced merchandise, which required that she make many more sales by comparison with the other department sales. Another statement of command that people in my prosperity classes found especially powerful was, "Everything and everybody prospers me now, and I prosper everything and everybody now." By the daily, consistent verbal use of this statement, a government employee soon was informed of an inheritance that had been available but unclaimed for several years. Another student who used this statement of command became one of 11 heirs to inherit a gravel pit. Because of the number of heirs, the amount to be realized from this inheritance was predicted to be quite small. But as this person continued to daily declare, "Everything and everybody prospers me now, and I prosper everything and everybody now," the income checks received from this gravel pit began arriving monthly in substantial amounts. During the winter months when the gravel business was supposed to slump, this student received the largest checks of all. Command your good to appear. There are hundreds of affirmative statements you can use that will command good to appear, but definite declarations of command should be used to meet definite needs. You should not hesitate to use them. For instance, if your money supply is low or if your purse seems empty, take it in your hands and declare aloud a number of times, in privacy of course, "I bless you and bless you for the riches of God that are now being demonstrated in and through you." As you enjoy your meals, it is good to think of statements of blessing and appreciation for them, along with the old-fashioned habit of table blessing. When you dress, it is good to think thoughts of appreciation and blessing of your clothing. In a recent lecture, I gave the following statements for definite uses and was amazed at how many business people commented on them afterwards and asked for their exact wording. For the perfect clothes and wardrobe which every prosperous thinker should have, I give thanks that I am beautifully and appropriately clothed with the rich substance of God. For the perfect, beautiful, comfortable home, whether it be one room, an apartment, or a house, I give thanks that I am beautifully and appropriately housed with the rich substance of God. And for the perfect transportation which every prosperous thinker should have, I give thanks that I am beautifully and appropriately transported with the rich substance of God. The ladies especially like this statement of command. I give thanks for ever-increasing health, youth, and beauty. I suppose I might be considered an extremist on the subject of affirmative statements because I have them scotch-taped in various spots in my home. Some of the neighborhood children have been so fascinated with them that they drop by occasionally just to see if I have changed the statements and to ask for copies. The above statement about clothes is attached to my closet door. The one on health, youth, and beauty is taped to my mirror. The one I keep taped on the pantry door is, I rejoice in the bounty of God, constantly manifesting as overflowing supply here and now. To keep down unnecessary telephone calls, which can be such a waste of time, near my telephone is this declaration of command. Divine order is now established and maintained. Harmony reigns supreme. It is good to begin the day with affirmative statements which help you to gain control of your day. I suggest this one. With praise and thanksgiving, I set the riches of God before me this day to guide, govern, protect, and prosper me. All things needful are now provided. My rich good becomes visible this day. So that you will speak words of prosperity and success each day, which is a form of commanding it to come forth, I suggest this affirmation. My words are charged with prospering power. Other favorite statements of command in some of my prosperity classes have been, for increased income, I give thanks that my financial income now increases mightily through the direct action of God's rich good. For the payment of bills, indebtedness, and financial obligations, I give thanks for the immediate, complete payment of all financial obligations in God's own wonderful way. For increased success along all lines, I give thanks that in every day, in every way, I am growing richer and richer. A statement of command that the business people found helpful for harmony in their homes and businesses was this. Let there be peace within my walls and prosperity within my palaces. Affirmations are helpful to your work. A railroad employee told me how he used statements of command to help in his work. He was asked to repair a train engine that no one else had been able to adjust. When he heard of various mechanics who had failed to repair this engine, he became apprehensive. But then he remembered the prosperity law of command. Before beginning work on the train engine, he went aside to a quiet place. From his wallet, he took this statement and went over it a number of times. I am a child of the living God. Therefore, I am one with his wisdom. That wisdom now leads me in paths of righteousness, peace, and true success. As he was thinking of these words and letting them fill his mind with peace and confidence, another railroad employee passed through the shop and asked what he was doing. He replied that he was going over a plan he intended to use in repairing the train engine. Shortly thereafter, he returned to his work and quickly repaired the troublesome train engine. Soon the other employee again approached him and asked for a copy of that plan he had used with such success. A postal employee was required to take an efficiency test. He decided to take control of the experience rather than to fear it. He declared over and over, "Divine intelligence knows all I need to know, and divine intelligence now shows me all I need to know." His test proved that he was most efficient, and it was an easy experience for him. Recently, a man in New York City used a number of the foregoing statements of command. After reading an article that I had written on the subject, he reported these results. At the time I read of the affirmative power of command, my business was in a state of great uncertainty. It soon developed that I was going to have to move out of the rent-free office I had been occupying. Through grace, I found a new and convenient office at a reasonable rate, but there was no new business in sight. It became clear to me that I must have absolute faith in God and go ahead with the radio production I had been planning, though I had not the faintest idea where the capital would come from to finance it. And there were personal and business debts to be paid as well. Then in the subway on the way to work, I read your article containing a number of definite affirmation statements on prosperity and success. I began using all the affirmations in the article, and when I got to the office, I copied them off and continued using them. The next day, I was led to call an acquaintance in the financial world who had suggested a year before, in what I had taken to be an offhand remark, that I come around and see him sometime. When I called him, he wanted to see me immediately. We had lunch, and I laid before him my plans and told him how much money I would need. He immediately agreed to all my proposals, except that he refused to take as large a share of the profits as I was ready to give him. And the loan I needed, he insisted, must be interest-free. Exactly a week later, our charter having been filed in Albany and a check received for initial working capital, I was signing stock certificates as president of my new company. Thus, one businessman's proof of the law of command. I have never known a person to conscientiously follow the method of daily affirmation and command for even a short time without producing satisfying results in his life. Nor have I ever known a student to really succeed if he omitted the daily use of verbal and silent declarations of command. Often I have met students who could tell me all about the theory of successful living, but they were demonstrating little of it. Upon questioning them, I invariably found that they did not use the law of command. Many of them thought it was beneath their dignity to say definite prosperous statements and definite words of success for 15 minutes each day, although they did not find it beneath their dignity to speak definite words of hard times, lack, and financial difficulty the rest of the day, nor did they find it beneath their dignity to live in indebtedness and financial embarrassment. You can take your choice and follow the high road or the low road of life. The law of prosperous command leads you to the high road, to the royal road of success. A mind that has been steeped in poverty and failure thinking for years needs daily help in rising into richer thoughts, attitudes, and expectations. Often it takes special methods to bring results in the face of extreme circumstances. If saying definite words of success and prosperity seems an unusual method, then so be it. But go ahead and try it if you wish to change the tide of your thinking from poverty and failure to prosperity and success. In the midst of extraordinary experiences, you will often find it necessary to exert a little added effort to produce satisfactory results. Jacob found it necessary to wrestle with the angel until the break of day, or until the breaking forth of good in the situation, in order to obtain his blessing. Sometimes you will find it necessary to do likewise. Affirmations can solve your problems. Dr. Emily Cady, formerly a physician in New York City, has written that when she faced extreme situations, she always struck out and used the boldest, most daring statements of command she could think of. Only after she took command did she find relief from her problems. In one instance, the statement of command which she used to be freed of the strong personality of another who had tormented her was, "There is no personality such as this in the universe. There is nothing but God." In another instance, she had a sprained ankle that was badly swollen and painful. Finally, she shut herself up in the privacy of her own room and affirmed over and over, "There is only God. All seeming else is a lie." Immediately the pain and swelling subsided, and her healing came quickly. At one point, she had been trying for 2 years to prove that God was the source of her supply, regardless of her patient's financial response to her treatment. In prayer, it was finally revealed to her that she had not used the law of command. She had not made the positive assertion of prosperity. She then began affirming, "It is done. God is now manifested as my supply." She writes that this thought proved to be her deliverance from poverty, and that never again did she have a financial need that was not met. Dr. Cady records these experiences in her book, How I Used Truth, published by Unity School of Christianity. Mere knowing about the power of prosperous thinking isn't enough. You must put it into action. The daily verbal use of positive statements helps you do that. Affirmations can work wonders. Recently, a prospective mother asked for a positive statement of command to use when she went into the delivery room. Though she did not anticipate difficulties in giving birth to her child, it was possible, since she was 40 years old and had not had a baby in several years. The statement of command given to her was this: "God in the midst of me is mighty in life, health, and strength. In joy and with ease I bring forth my perfect child." Over and over she declared these words when the activity of birth began. She was pleased to discover that though there was the usual activity which accompanies childbirth, there was practically no pain. Then a little later, the doctor declared that she would not give birth in the usual way, but that the position of the baby made it necessary for a breech birth. Instead of becoming fearful, this mother continued to affirm over and over, "God in the midst of me is mighty in life, health, and strength. In joy and with ease I bring forth my perfect child." A little later, the doctor declared, "We must wait a few minutes. It seems that the baby is changing its position, and perhaps you will give birth in the normal way after all." And she did, normally and almost painlessly. Most of us have been human pygmies when we might have been spiritual giants, had we dared to command God's good to manifest as He empowered us to do, as stated in the first book of the Bible. Dr. Lewis L. Dunnington, a Methodist minister, has described the law of command as the great affirmations that work such wonders in human lives. In the foreword of his book, The Inner Splendor, published by the Macmillan Company, New York. He also relates how he discovered some years ago that the most poised, integrated, and well-balanced people in his congregation were those who were using the affirmative approach to life. Dr. Dunnington states that many in his congregation were convinced that they received more concrete help from the use of great affirmations of faith than from any other technique. Learning of their success, he too investigated the power of affirmation and began using it. He writes that after he began applying the technique of affirmation consistently, his congregation grew from 400 to more than 2,000. I can readily understand why this would happen, because I discovered while in the business world and later as a minister that the masses today are lonely for a spiritual way of life that isn't just theory and doctrine, but one that works to produce health, harmony, and abundance in their lives. Join in affirming with another. It is good to have at least one other person use the power of affirmative command with you. especially when situations do not seem to respond immediately to your own commands. Be sure, of course, that it is someone that is in agreement with you, with what you are trying to accomplish, and that that person also believes in this success technique. I often asked members of the church staff to use this law of command with me about various situations. My secretary and I affirmed often for the perfect results of our workday. This is a time of divine completion. The finished works of divine love and wisdom appear this day. Often the bookkeeper and I affirmed for financial ministry. This is a time of divine completion. The finished results of divine substance and supply now appear. Often the church board members united with me in affirming for the entire ministry. God's kingdom is come, and God's supreme good will now be done in every phase of this ministry. Always our periods of affirmative command brought satisfying results. Write out your affirmation. Perhaps you are in a situation where there seems little privacy for verbal use of the law of command. In that event, write out your affirmations over and over again. A successful businessman, lecturer, and writer once told me how he had handled such a situation years ago after he learned of the law of command. He was doing work that greatly dissatisfied him. He wished to expand into other fields, to receive greater compensation, and be free to write, lecture, and travel in connection with his work. Furthermore, at the time he was very thin and in poor health. His home life was inharmonious and dissatisfying too. Indeed, every phase of this man's world needed uplifting. He was convinced that the law of command could change all this, but because his family was not interested in trying such a newfangled idea, he realized it would be necessary to make his affirmations silently. Since he felt that this would not be completely successful, he hit on the idea of writing them out. Quietly each night he would retire to his room with sharpened pencils and sheets of paper. There he would write out one statement with which he wished to impress his mind hundreds of times. He wrote statements concerning health, wealth, and happiness. At the conclusion of one day that had seemed unusually hectic, he wrote an affirmation hundreds of times concerning the perfect solution to a business disagreement that had arisen between him and his business partner. Over and over he wrote, "This situation does not dismay me, for God, the very Spirit of love and wisdom, is with me to uphold and sustain me, and to make all things right. I trust everything in my life to the tender care of the Father, because I know His will for me is health, happiness, prosperity, spiritual unfoldment, and all that is good." As he went to sleep that night, he silently affirmed over and over, "Nothing but good can come into my life, for God is in charge." The next morning, very early, his business partner telephoned to say that he wished to buy out this man's portion of his business. They then amicably agreed on a sale price. The transaction was quickly concluded, and this man was then free to begin building a better life for himself and his family. His health soon improved, and he began to gain weight, and later he even had to diet. His wife found work similar to that she had done before marriage, and she resumed working with her husband's consent. The new activity led to a sense of freedom, fulfillment, and harmony between them. Through his writing, lectures, and financial transactions, many others are being blessed with health, wealth, and happiness. It all began when he dared each night to write out hundreds of times some simple words as to how he wished things to be, rather than fretting about how they appeared at the moment. Affirm your way to health. Recently, a friend related to me how the power of affirmative commands had helped her regain her health. It seems that she had undergone a very serious operation, after which her doctor informed her and her husband that she would probably live only about 3 months. However, her husband knew how sensitive the body is to the power of thought and how it responds positively or negatively to one's attitudes about it. When she returned home, he said to her, "You heard the 3-month diagnosis. You can accept it and die, or you can reject it and live. But if you want to live, you must do 2 things. First, you must stop talking about your operation and hospital experience. It is over. Forget it. Second, you must think about me, affirm me, and expect to live." He then suggested that she affirm daily, "Let divine health manifest for me and in me now." She began using these simple words of command until it became a subconscious habit with her to think them many times a day. When friends or neighbors came to call, her husband always said, "We are not discussing her operation or hospital experience. That is over. She is enjoying good health now." That was 22 years ago. That lady told me she has never had another sick day since that time. Perhaps you wonder why I write about healing in a book on prosperity. The word prosper means to thrive or succeed in any given goal or desired objective. When I write about prosperity, I write of the desires for wholeness and balance in one's life and affairs. Truly, me is worth little without health or the ability to produce it. Psychosomatic medicine, as well as psychology and psychiatry, all agree on the remarkable power which the mind has over the body for illness or for health. Affirmations fascinate and inspire. The whole world desires and is fascinated by the prosperity law of command. Recently, when I spoke to a group of college students, I showed them the various types of printed statements of command which spiritual counselors give to people who come for spiritual help in solving their problems. I showed this college group perhaps a dozen different affirmative statements, explaining that each statement applied to specific types of situations and problems. At the close of my lecture, I left the affirmative statements on the lecture table and invited the students to inspect them more carefully and to take them with them if they wished. I was astonished how fast those students rushed forth after the lecture and picked up every affirmation. When one student mentioned how concerned she was about a quiz that afternoon, I offered her an affirmation to use. All of the other students who had attended the lecture remained and wrote out the affirmation too. It was, "I am letting divine intelligence think through me. I know, I remember, I understand, I express myself perfectly." A businessman once came to me to discuss the various ways that affirmations have helped in his life and affairs. He declared, "I think the power of affirmation has literally saved my life. 6 months ago, I was contemplating suicide when I found my way to one of your lectures and first heard of the power of command. It sounded too good to be true, but being in desperate circumstances financially as well as in my marriage, I decided to try the affirmative way. After all, what could I lose? Today, I am on top of the world again, thanks to affirmations. It really works." Only a few weeks ago, I met an old friend who seemed as low as I had felt 6 months ago. He said, "You know, I don't see how I can go on. Suicide seems the only way out for me. Now, if I had your happy, optimistic, victorious outlook on life, how happy I would be." I replied, "A few months ago, I almost did what you are talking about, but I learned about the affirmative way of thinking and acting. It pulled me up on my bootstraps, and now I am on the road to success again." I then gave my depressed friend some printed affirmations that helped him to achieve success. Although they were slightly frayed around the edges from much use, the friend seemed grateful for them. Recently, I again met my friend who said, "Thanks for those statements. They pulled me up by the bootstraps, too. I don't see how a few words can change a fellow's whole life, but they have certainly changed mine." You can have any of God's rich good for which you are willing to pay the price of daily affirmation and command. There is no easier or more delightful way of changing your thinking and getting on the royal road to success. You indeed become what you want to be by affirming that you already are. I suggest that you make this the last phase of a 3-step formula for prosperity. First, daily write out your notes of desired good. Second, mentally image the successful results. Third, boldly and deliberately affirm and command those successful results to appear. If you persist daily in following these 3 simple steps, you will not be able to stop the flood tide of your good from overflowing your life. The Prosperity Law of Increase, Chapter 7. The time has now come to relax and enjoy what you have already learned in the previous chapters. Indeed, the time has come to act as though you are a full-fledged, prosperous thinker, because by the time you have gotten to this chapter, you are truly beginning to be. And you are now ready for the prosperity law of increase. The use of the law of increase is easy and pleasant. It consists first in establishing and maintaining an attitude of rich increase towards everything and everybody. In other words, let your main thought when thinking of yourself and others be the thought of riches, prosperity, success, and victorious good. Just by thinking of yourself and others as rich, successful, prosperous, and victorious, you help make it so. As you contact others by mail, telephone, and in person, let your thought about them be one of increased good. Just by giving them the benefit of your rich thoughts is a giant step in helping them to become that way. They may not be consciously aware of your prosperous thinking about them, but they will subconsciously receive and be richly blessed. Often they will respond to you in some rich and happy way. Thought of increase turns the tide. I do not believe that jail is quite the proper place for a prosperous thinker, but nevertheless, a man who once found himself imprisoned decided to make the best of the situation. After he was made a trustee in the jail, he was allowed to make occasional telephone calls, and sometimes he would telephone me, reporting his progress. Once he called very excitedly, declaring that for some time the main office of the jail had needed to be air-conditioned. He had visualized, affirmed, and given thanks that it would be, since the people working there had been kind to him, and he wished to see them comfortable and happy. He said that at last the office had received air conditioning, and that if no other good came out of his jail experience, at least he felt that this increased good for the office force was an indication of how prosperous thinking could bring happy results. How quickly affairs change for people after they begin thinking prosperously about themselves and others. A woman who had been married 18 years began to apply the prosperity law of increase in her world. She received a letter from a man whom she had worked for prior to her marriage. He declared that when she married, he had been in financial straits and had not been able to give her a decent wedding gift. Now that he was successful, he decided that the time had come to do something about the matter. He told her that a nice wedding gift was being mailed to her and her bridegroom of 18 years. A woman in a poor section of the city heard about prosperous thinking and began to give her neighbors the benefit of the thought of increase as well as herself. In a few days, a check came in the mail for $125, which seemed a tremendous sum to her. It was from an insurance company, which explained that it was a balance due her from the estate of her sister, who had died 8 years previously. A businessman who knows the law of increase uses it constantly in his work as a credit manager to collect accounts owed his company. Little wonder that last year he led in collections for the entire company, which has offices all over the South. One customer owed his company thousands of dollars, which no one had been able to collect. The account was so large that one of the company's officials came from the home office in another state to investigate the collection of this account. The credit manager stated to the company official before they visited the customer, "The only way we will ever collect all this money is by being kind, courteous, and positive in talking with him. We've got to restore his faith in himself. We've got to show him that we believe he will soon be able to pay this amount in full. We've got to use the thought of increase on him. Criticism will get us nowhere." Thus, when they talked with this customer, they spoke of their faith in him and their belief that he could and would pay the debt he had contracted in good faith. Several days later, this customer rushed into the credit manager's office with his first payment on his account, after months of non-payment. He declared, "The other morning when you walked into my office, I was feeling so low and such a failure in my business affairs that if you had criticized me, I would have immediately given up and gone to my lawyer's office and declared bankruptcy. But you were so kind to me and so positive in your faith that my business could be saved, it gave me the courage to believe it too. And already the turning point has come." You always use the law of increase or decrease. All people are seeking an increase in food, clothes, better homes, more beauty, knowledge, leisure, pleasure, luxury, more satisfaction in their work, more increase of good in everything. And rightly so, for it is a divine desire. Thus, the normal desire for increased good should not be condemned or suppressed. It is divine and can be lifted to divine levels of expression through the spiritual laws of prosperous thinking. How wonderful to use the law of increase rather than the negative law of decrease. Often when people criticize, condemn, and belittle others, they do not realize that through the law of mind action, they are asking for the same things to happen to them. Never waste your time giving yourself or others the thought of decrease. Like bread cast upon the water, what you send out comes back to you multiplied, and it will produce corresponding experiences in your own life. During a steel strike, 2 professional men proved the law of increase. One, a chiropractor, refused to talk hard times or listen to such talk from his patients. Even though his office and much of his practice was located in the strike area, not far from the steel mills, he constantly talked increase, prosperity, and success. One night he attended a monthly meeting of the local Chiropractors Association, and most of the men present described what a tough time they were having in their practice because of the strike. Finally, someone asked him about his practice, and he amazed the group by replying, "My practice has never been better. I refuse to talk of hard times during a steel strike or at any other time. I have found that the power of prosperous thinking can change all that." A lawyer in the strike area also used the law of increase during this same period. His associates in the legal profession were constantly declaring how bad business was and that their practice was off. This man decided that to avoid falling into that limited state of thought, he had better be firm in his thinking.